Chapter 376. He didn't say much, but there was some desire in his eyes. Such desire made Empress Dowager's eyes turn red. The grandson she cared about most might not see these night scenes that he longed for at any time. Chen, you can go after taking a rest. The emperor's expression became more and more gentle. Such a gentle tone was not seen by many concubines. For a time, many jealous eyes entangled Chu Luchen, but then many people showed a trace of sarcasm. He was just a sick child. Why did he care about a dying person? Thank you, uncle. Chu Luchen said, and then walked out of the hall with Xiao Xuanzi. Outside the hall, Chu Luchen stood under a tree and calmed down a little. He reached out and rubbed his forehead. There were so many people in the hall, and his head was indeed a little uncomfortable. When he got out of the hall, he felt a little better. Chen, An extremely weak voice sounded in his ear. Chu Luchen looked back and saw a beautiful woman under the shadow of the tree. She was dressed in a light white dress, on which the moonlight sprinkled the shadow, as if there were dark flowers printed on her clothes. A pair of beautiful big eyes were full of tears, looking at Chu Luchen, also full of desire. Two palace maids stood behind her. Seeing that she was about to fall, they hurriedly reached out to help her, while secretly looking at Chu Luchen. Chu Luchen calmly withdrew his eyes, as if he didn't see the woman under the tree. He shook his sleeves, turned around and strode away. Xiao Xuanzi looked at the woman, hurriedly saluted, and then quickly caught up with Chu Luchen. Looking at Chu Luchen's back, 2 lines of tears slowly slid down the woman's beautiful face. Your Highness, don't be sad. His Highness will understand you. A palace maid persuaded in a low voice. He is blaming me, he has been blaming me. The woman muttered to herself. Tears rolled down her flower-like cheeks, and she sobbed in a low voice. Your Highness, His Highness will understand you in the future and will reconcile with you. The palace maid hurriedly persuaded again. Let's go back. The woman bowed her head and wiped her tears. After a long time, she raised her head and said. Aren't we going to wait for His Majesty? Another palace maid asked as she looked at the tall palace. Why wait? The woman shook her head. She had already achieved her goal of waiting here, so there was no need to wait any longer. 2 palace maids supported the woman and left. She was just as mysterious as when she came. All the high-ranking concubines were in the main hall, but no one knew her identity. Sir, where are you going? Xiao Xuanzi followed Chu Luchen and asked anxiously when he saw that Chu Luchen had no intention of returning to his palace. Let's go out of the palace to enjoy the night view. Chu Luchen said casually, as if the woman just now had not affected his mind at all. At this time? Do you want to take a break? Xiao Xuanzi felt that his master's face was a little too bright. With such a bright color, was he really not drunk? No, let's go and have a look first. Chu Luchen said. Yes, master. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly said. Out of the palace gate, Chu Luchen's carriage had already stopped at the gate of the palace. Chu Luchen got on the carriage at the gate, and the carriage moved slowly. In the carriage, Chu Luchen's long eyes narrowed slightly, and he leaned on the couch on one side with one hand supporting his head. Master, second miss is going out with the first miss of Qin's mansion and the 2 childs of Qi's mansion today. The 2 childs of Qi's mansion are the 2 sons of the former magistrate of Jiangzhou. Xiao Xuanzi reported to Chu Luchen. Why are they following her? Chu Luchen said lightly. I don't know. Maybe General Qin is worried that his 2 daughters will get lost, so he specially found them. When they were in Jiangzhou, the 2 families were on good terms. When they were in Jiangzhou, they were on good terms, but they didn't marry each other. How can they go back to the original way when they are in such a situation? How bold they are. Find out what Qin Huayong wants to do. Chu Luchen sneered. Yes, I know. I will ask someone to find out. Xiao Xuanzi nodded and said. This matter was indeed strange, and it was not normal no matter how he looked at it. Where is she? Chu Luqian said as a matter of course. Second miss is wandering on the street. After she separated from others, she entered a shop. It is a calligraphy and painting shop. It is the shop that has been looking for calligraphy. She has not come out since she entered. Although Xiao Xuanzi followed Chu Luqian, he had already got the news. Go there. Chu Luqian slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said lazily. Yes, it is not far from here. It will be faster to go around from the back. Xiao Xuanzi lifted the curtain and looked at the night view outside. In the past, it was very suitable to go through from here, and it was fast. But today was different. The main road was blocked by people coming and going. It would be faster to take a small path and go around a corner. The horse carriage silently took a turn and went into an intersection. Qin Wanru looked at Xiao Xuanzi's eyes in front of her in astonishment. She covered her face with a handkerchief. Qin Wanru also recognized that it was Xiao Xuanzi. Second miss, come in with me. Our master is waiting for you inside. Xiao Xuanzi stood at the door not far behind Qin Wanru and said to Qin Wanru with a smile. Where is Yujie? Qin Wanru looked around and didn't find Yujie. Yujie has gone in and is now in the yard. Second miss, please. Xiao Xuanzi smiled like a flower and pointed behind him. Qin Wanru walked helplessly. When she entered the yard, she saw Yujie was indeed standing in the yard, but there was a guard in front of her. The sword in his hand was in front of Yujie. Let her go. Qin Wanru said a little angrily. After the yard door was closed, Xiao Xuanzi took off the handkerchief on his face and waved his hand. The sword in the guard's hand fell down. Yujie hurried to Qin Wanru and said anxiously, Miss. She just wanted to answer her miss's question, but she was pulled here. When she wanted to speak, the sword was on her neck. She was so scared that she didn't dare to move. At this time, when she saw it was Xiao Xuanzi, she breathed a sigh of relief. Yujie, don't panic. I did this to deceive others. Xiao Xuanzi came to apologize with a smile. Yujie glared at him fiercely and said nothing. Where is your master? Qin Wanru looked at the empty yard and asked. Master is waiting for you upstairs. Second miss, please go up. Xiao Xuanzi pointed to the attic above and said. There was light in the attic, but only a figure could be seen. Qin Wanru sighed helplessly and turned to walk into the room. Yujie moved and wanted to follow her, but she was stopped by Xiao Xuanzi. Yujie, you'd better enjoy the scenery downstairs. The upper part of the attic is the place for the master to enjoy the scenery. As servants, we can't overstep. Yujie, you stay down there. Qin Wanru said slowly after she stopped. Needless to say, this was Chu Liuqian's idea. Yes, miss. Although Yujie was not very willing, she had to stay. She glared at Xiao Xuanzi fiercely and shook off Xiao Xuanzi's hand fiercely. She stood under the courtyard wall and said, Who wants to enjoy the night scenery? You can enjoy it yourself. Seeing Qin Wanru in front of him walking into the room step by step, Xiao Xuanzi smiled with satisfaction. Looking at Yujie who was still angry, he ran over and pointed to the wing room on the side. Yujie, do you want to sit there for a while? There are pastries brought from the palace. Pastries from the palace? Yujie was a little tempted. Seeing Yujie hesitated, Xiao Xuanzi immediately said, They are carefully prepared for today by the imperial chefs in the palace. Even if you want to eat them in the past, you may not be able to eat them. Even the people in the palace may not be able to eat them. It could be seen that they were good things. Yujie felt that she was really hungry. She had eaten some in the mansion before, but it was just a little. But even so, she did not intend to forgive Xiao Xuanzi. She glared at him fiercely again, turned around and strode to the wing room. She was hungry now, so she should eat the pastries first. Qin Wanru climbed the stairs step by step, turned a corner, and went up to the attic on the second floor. The attic was lit, and there was a table of dishes near the window. Looking at the steaming appearance, it should be cooked and served just now. At this time, Chu Luchen had sat in front of the chair again. He reached out to pick up the cup in front of him, took a sip, and slowly turned his head. His handsome face had never been flushed before, which made people feel that he was more like a jade and unparalleled in the world. This Chu Luchen even made people feel amazed. He was handsome, flawless, and unparalleled in the world. Qin Wanru had to admire Chu Luchen's face, which was so handsome that it made women feel ashamed. Because of his pale face in the past, such a face was less shimmering, but now it was more enchanting and evil than before. Come, sit down. Chu Luchen reached out and pointed to the chair opposite him. A table of dishes, 2 chairs, and looking at the window, it was an excellent place. Qin Wanru walked over and sat down. The sweet smell of the pastries in front of her immediately made her swallow her saliva secretly. In fact, she was not full. When she was in Qin's mansion, Qi Tianyu and Qin Yuru sat there, and she watched them carefully, so she didn't eat much. Things were so weird that she didn't want to eat. At this time, she was attracted by the smell of the dishes in front of her, and she was hungry. Not only was she hungry, but her stomach was growling. Hearing the voice in her ears, Qin Wanru's face was stunned at first, and then it turned red. Then she looked at Chu Luchen with shame, and even didn't know how to react. Even though she was reborn, she had never encountered such an embarrassing moment. As a miss of an aristocratic family, she was so hungry that her stomach was growling in front of Chu Luchen. What a situation it was. Chu Luchen was also stunned. He raised his beautiful eyes and looked at Qin Wanru. No matter how smart he was, he obviously didn't expect such a scene. Later, when he saw Qin Wanru's ashamed and angry eyes, he suddenly laughed out loud. Qin Wanru tried hard to maintain her calmness and wanted to look normal. But when she saw Chu Luchen's overly handsome face with laughter, her face was as red as blood. What made her feel even more ashamed was that her stomach was growling again. Chapter 377. Chu Luchen finally stopped laughing when Qin Wanru was so ashamed and angry that she couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at Qin Wanru with interest. His handsome face was full of lad's tiredness. He didn't have the usual elegance and calmness, as if he walked out of ink and looked very real. Since you are hungry, why don't you eat? He raised his head and looked at Qin Wanru with a smile. Qin Wanru felt that she didn't need to hide anything since she had lost her face. She picked up the chopsticks and angrily picked up a piece of pastry and ate it without raising her head. The pastry was very fragrant and melted in her mouth. It was a little familiar and it was the taste she liked. She looked at the pastry in front of her in astonishment. She could be sure that she had never eaten it before, no matter the appearance or the taste. But she felt it was familiar, as if there was this taste deep in her memory. She took another bite and tasted it carefully. There was a trace of hesitation in her watery eyes. Did she eat it in her last life? In her last life, she had entered the palace, but why didn't she remember it? What's wrong? It doesn't taste right. Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows. Under the light, he stopped laughing and looked as gentle as jade. It tastes very good, Qin Wanru said. She raised her watery eyes and stared at Chu Luchen's face. She was a little hesitant, and her long black eyelashes fluttered on her watery eyes. She looked a little ignorant like a deer. Of course it's good. It was specially made by the imperial kitchen in the palace. Chu Luchen said lazily. Child, you also like this taste? Qin Wanru raised her eyes curiously. I don't like this sweet and greasy taste. Chu Luchen snorted coldly and said unhappily. Thank you, child. Qin Wanru thanked him consciously. Since you like it, eat more. It's not easy for me to bring the pastry from the palace. But what's wrong with your Qin's mansion? Can't you let people have a good meal on New Year's Eve? Chu Luchen looked at Qin Wanru with disgust and said. He leisurely reached out to pick up the pastry Qin Wanru had just used and tasted it. He frowned and said, it's so sweet. Why did he still eat it when he disliked it so much? Qin Wanru speechlessly watched Chu Luchen eat it one bite at a time. He elegantly finished the pastry in his hand and then took another one. If your highness doesn't like it, there's no need to use it. Looking at the few pieces of pastries on the plate, Qin Wanru decided to tell the truth. She hadn't eaten a piece yet, but this man had eaten them all. This king is hungry. He pointed at the plate in front of Qin Wanru and said, I want to eat this. There were only the two of them upstairs. Xiao Xuanzi was not there. Chu Liuchen's handsome eyes looked straight at Qin Wanru, as if he was waiting for her to take it to him. Looking at the plate of pastries in front of her, Qin Wanru stood up helplessly, picked up the pastries in front of her and put them in front of Chu Luchen. Chu Luchen looked really hungry, and he was even hungrier than Qin Wanru, who was so hungry that she cried out a moment ago. It was very pleasing to watch this handsome young man eat, especially when he could move so elegantly. Prince, are you full? Even so, Qin Wanru still asked in surprise. I'm not full. Chu Luchen said. He nodded. The dishes in the palace banquet are not delicious? Qin Wanru asked curiously. Would the dishes made by the imperial kitchen in the palace not be delicious? Of course, the answer was no. She had tasted it just now, and it was much more delicious than the dishes made by the new old maid in her mansion. It's not suitable for people who eat. Chu Luchen said casually. He put down the chopsticks in his hand and said leisurely. His slender fingers with distinct joints knocked on the table a few times. Your Highness, you don't like to eat in the palace? Qin Wanru became more and more curious. It's boring. Chu Luchen rarely answered her questions. It seemed that he was in a good mood. He raised his long and narrow eyes and picked up Qin Wanru. Do you think it's comfortable for me to eat in the palace? A crown prince who was deposed dragged his sick body. Even if the Empress Dowager doted on him and the emperor treated him equally, so what if he was treated as a prince? There were so many people in the palace, and there were all kinds of people. He was a child without parents, and he was so sick. He must have seen a lot of supercilious eyes and heard a lot of gossip. How could he really treat the people in the palace as his family? The feeling of being without parents was just like her, or even more uncomfortable than her. No matter how bad he was just ignored in the general's mansion, and Qin Huayong had no other children. He didn't have any other children, but the emperor was different. The emperor robbed him of the throne and pretended to show how good he was to Chu Luchen. But who knew what the emperor did in private? When the imperial power moved, most of the defeated side lost their lives. Chu Luchen survived, but his life was probably inseparable from his own physical condition. If he was really healthy, he might not survive. It was so easy to kill a child who was still in swaddling clothes, even if he was protected by the Empress Dowager. His illness was the cause and the effect. She inexplicably felt a trace of pity in her heart. Chu Luchen seemed to be well off, but in fact, he had been treading on thin ice. Such a beautiful young man who seemed to walk out of a painting was actually not happy, or even safe, because he had no parents like her. She reached out and changed the dishes in front of her to Chu Luchen. She saw clearly that these were the dishes that Chu Luchen liked to eat. The so-called favorite dishes were just used more chopsticks. What, you want to eat with me? Chu Luchen looked at Qin Wanru changing the dishes lazily, and his smile became more and more lazy. Prince, if you are hungry, eat more. Qin Wanru sighed helplessly. Since you want to eat with me so much, I allow you to accompany me during the spring festival. Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and smiled lightly. Qin Wanru withdrew her thoughts. What deposed crown prince? What pitiful. This was bound to be a powerful emperor in the future. What was there to be pitiful about? She was the most pitiful one. Prince, when will you go back to the palace? I have to keep watch at night. Chu Liuchen's face darkened, and he said coldly. Did he look unhappy again? Prince, Shouldn't you go back to the palace to keep watch at night with Empress Dowager? Accompany the Empress Dowager to guard the palace? Qin Wanru asked cautiously, for fear of making the prince unhappy again. Are you not willing to keep watch with me? Chu Luchen squinted at her and asked. I dare not, but I have been out for a long time, and I am afraid that my grandmother and mother will be worried. Qin Wanru said more cautiously. Qin Yuru and others found that she was not here, and they would definitely look for her. If she did not go back, it would be bad. What are you afraid of? I will send you back. Chu Luchen said casually, stood up, and walked to the window. The gauze curtain in front of the window was down, but the scenery outside could be seen. The embroidered gauze could be seen outside at a glance, especially when the outside was brightly lit. Come here. Chu Luchen said to Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the night outside. The night was clear, and people were coming and going, and it was very lively. Even if she was a little far away, she could still feel the bustle on the street. Look, over there. Chu Luchen stretched out his hand, took Qin Wanru to his side, and pointed to a place. Qin Wanru staggered and bumped into Chu Luchen. When she just stood still, her attention was attracted by the scene below. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and she asked in astonishment, what are they looking for? In the middle of the long street, there were a few people who looked different from the surrounding people, and they seemed to be looking for something. Although they were dressed differently, they were all young men. Some of them stood in the corridor of the shop, some were in the crowd, and some were following the crowd. If Qin Wanru did not stand on a high place and see clearly, no one would think that there was something similar. And the last of these people was the bookstore from which Qin Wanru came before. There seemed to be a few people standing in the shadow. When a pair of young ladies from aristocratic families passed by with their servant girls, a person came out of the bookstore, stepped forward to stop them, and then retreated to the side. After a while, another pair of master and servant girls were stopped. On the night of New Year's Eve, many young ladies from aristocratic families came out to stroll with their servants. It was almost impossible to see them from the back, but Qin Wanru still keenly felt that the masters and servants who were stopped were not tall, and they did not look like old young ladies from aristocratic families. Looking for you. What did Zhuozhuo do just now? How did you provoke them? Chu Luchen said casually. Because of the shock, Qin Wanru did not even notice that Chu Liuchen's hand was still on her shoulder, and he even called her by her nickname, which only her grandmother would call her. Looking for me? Why? Qin Wanru said in horror, and her head was covered with fine sweat. If she had been hiding at the entrance of the alley, she might have been found. Although she thought that the shopkeeper would send people to look for her, she did not expect that he would send so many people. What was the meaning of that calligraphy? What did you do just now? Chu Luchen asked leisurely. After patting Qin Wanru's thin shoulder with his slender fingers, he took the opportunity to touch her black hair. She looked more and more like the fat cat he raised, and it felt so comfortable to touch. He closed his beautiful eyes with great satisfaction. I saw a piece of calligraphy on the stage over there, and it was written very well, so I wanted to inquire about it. I told the shopkeeper that I had a piece of calligraphy and wanted to sell it. The shopkeeper was very interested and told me that the calligraphy was his boss's favorite. Then I left without saying anything. Who knew that he would look for me? Qin Wanru said. Do you think that the capital is too peaceful, and you want to try the means of the royal family? Chu Luchen squinted at her playfully, and patted her hair with his hand. His voice was lazy and gentle, but there was a hidden majesty and malice that made people feel sad. Chapter 378. Not everyone can send such a person. Chu Luchen looked at the few people who were looking for someone in the crowd with interest. It seemed casual, but in fact, their coordination was flawless. As soon as something happened, they immediately responded. This kind of manpower was naturally not something that just anyone could send. He didn't expect to find something here. It was a pleasant surprise. Xiao Xuanzi. Chu Luchen said to the people under the window. Although the voice was not loud, Xiao Xuanzi, who was standing downstairs, immediately heard it. He hurried upstairs and said respectfully to Chu Luchen, "Master. Go, find something for them to do." Chu Luchen pointed downstairs with his chin. Xiao Xuanzi glanced at the direction he pointed and saw those people. He immediately understood, "Master, I'll arrange it now. The shopkeeper of that shop can't stay." Chu Luchen said with a smile. "This servant understands." Xiao Xuanzi nodded, glanced at Qin Wanru with a smile, and turned to go downstairs again. When he was downstairs, he had asked Yu Jie and knew that Qin Wanru had been to a bookstore before. "Coincidentally, I've been investigating that bookstore recently. I didn't expect to bump into it so soon. What is Xiao Xuanzi going to do?" Qin Wanru looked at Xiao Xuanzi, who had gone downstairs quickly, and asked in surprise. "Since the shopkeeper has seen you and talked to you, he naturally can't stay." Chu Luchen smiled slightly and said lazily. These words made Qin Wanru feel a chill in her heart. Of course, she knew that it was the best way to do so. Although she didn't know who the shopkeeper was, it was certain that he was targeting her. It was also her wrong prediction that caused such a result. Of course, the best way was to get rid of the shopkeeper. She bit her lips and moved her fingers slightly, but she didn't say anything to stop him. She would not be soft-hearted. If the shopkeeper stayed, he would definitely see her, and he might even bring about a fatal disaster for her. Moreover, this disaster could also affect her family. "Thank you, Wang Ye." She bit her lips and heard herself say in a low voice. "This king's people will naturally not be bullied by others. If they dare to stretch out their claws, I'll chop them off." Chu Luchen said unhurriedly, but his words were filled with endless bloodthirsty coldness. Qin Wanru nodded. She would not pity the innocent shopkeeper. If she really went to ask an ordinary miss from an aristocratic family, she would probably die here this time. Moreover, if she could not find the calligraphy and painting in her shop, her whole family might be destroyed. This was definitely not the first time he would rather kill 1,000 innocents than let a single person go. However, his methods were ruthless and he didn't want others to know. "Aren't you afraid?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows as if he was surprised by her calmness. "If I'm scared, will they let me go?" Qin Wanru shook her head, and her charming eyes were as calm as water, with almost no ripples. The ripples just now had faded away. After her rebirth, she had decided not to be soft-hearted anymore. If she couldn't even protect herself and the people she cared about, there was no need to be soft-hearted. "Of course they won't let you go. You may have stirred up a great event. Those who know this event will not let you live." Chu Luchen suddenly chuckled meaningfully. "Your Highness will not let anyone live." Qin Wanru raised her eyes and looked at Chu Luchen. Her pair of beautiful eyes were full of Chu Luchen's handsome figure, but this figure seemed to have a little more hostility and brutality that was rarely seen in the past. Her hands hanging on both sides were clenched tightly. Only she knew that her heart was absolutely not calm at this time. "Of course I won't let anyone live, but you." Chu Luchen's hand touched Qin Wanru's slender neck. The teenager's hand was actually not big, but compared to Qin Wanru's slender neck, it still felt a lot bigger. His hand was placed on Qin Wanru's neck, and she could even feel the thick darkness and bloodthirsty coldness in Chu Luchen's eyes. "You are this king's man. How could this king kill you?" His hand touched Qin Wanru's neck gently, and his smile became gentle, as if the bloodthirsty and brutality just now were all wrong. His hand slid up again, fell on the top of her hair, and gently rubbed it, reminding her, "Shuozhua, look outside." Qin Wanru's head turned to the outside, and all the blood in her body slowly flowed back to her heart. Even so, she felt weak and relaxed because of the tension just now. Chu Luchen's hand fell from the top of her hair to her shoulder, and gently supported her. His movement was elegant, without a trace of anger. Qin Wanru's attention turned to the outside of the window, and there was a chaos outside. Someone was shouting, "Murder!" Assassins! Someone come quickly. The scream suddenly rose, and the pedestrians on the street were scared to run. The place where the sound came from, some people rushed over, and they were the few people who squeezed in the crowd to find someone. And the place where the accident happened was that shop. Something happened in that shop. Biting her lips, Qin Wanru heard her calm voice, "Is the shopkeeper dead?" "Dead," Chu Luchen said with certainty, and there was a trace of gorgeous coldness in his light smile, like a sharp unsheathed blade, lightly and sharply cutting the sharpest place of others. "Do you want to go and have a look?" "Can I?" Qin Wanru turned back. "Of course not. If you go down now, I'm afraid that someone will recognize you. After all, more than one shopkeeper saw you, right?" Chu Luchen laughed, as if he was amused by Qin Wanru's naivety. His words made Qin Wanru silent for a while. When she was there, more than one shopkeeper saw her. She suddenly thought of something. "Is it that shopkeeper? It's not good to keep that place, so just get rid of it." Chu Liuchen's smile became more and more gentle, and his eyes fell on the street entrance downstairs. Qin Wanru turned her head again, and found that the place was actually burning, and the fire was soaring. Some people were calling for help, some were putting out the fire, and some were running away. It was a mess. There was more than one person who died. Qin Wanru's eyesight was not bad, and she saw several people who had looked for her dead on the spot. This was the first time since she was reborn that she saw someone die in front of her like this, and it was because of her. Her cold fingers trembled, and she suddenly felt that her hand touched something warm and soft. She subconsciously looked down and saw Chu Liuchen's hand holding hers. His hand was warm this time. He held her cold little hand and exerted a little force. "Are you afraid?" Chu Liuchen suddenly asked with a faint smile. "No." Qin Wanru raised her head and shook her head decisively. She looked directly at Chu Liuchen's handsome face, which was like a young immortal coming out of an ink landscape painting, and there was a little coldness and hostility in her cold eyes. This situation was originally a life-or-death situation. Either they died, or she was in trouble. She would not think that others would be kind enough to let her go. If Chu Liuchen did not appear, she would be in trouble, and she might even be doomed eternally. "That's good. Sit down, I have something to tell you." Chu Liuchen laughed and took her hand to the table, and they sat down again. "Prince, what's the matter?" Qin Wanru asked. "Mingqiu Nun has entered the capital city." Chu Liuchen looked at her with a smile. "Where?" Qin Wanru was so excited that she put her hands on the table and was about to sit up. She looked straight at Chu Liuchen, full of joy. Counting the days, Mingqiu Nun should have entered the capital city, but she had not heard from Mingqiu Nun until now. She originally wanted to find a chance to ask Chu Liuchen. She went to the palace to see Imperial Grandmother, and she was very satisfied. Chu Liuchen said with some meaning. Qin Wanru was stunned, and she blinked her watery eyes. She hesitated and asked, "Is Mingqiu Nun living in the palace now?" "Temporarily in the palace," Chu Liuchen said. "This. How can I see Mingqiu Nun?" Qin Wanru said helplessly. The palace was not other places, and not everyone could see it if they wanted to. Even though Empress Dowager said that she could enter the palace at any time, and she had the token given by Chu Liuchen, Qin Wanru did not dare to act rashly. "In a few days, when I return to the mansion, I will bring Mingqiu Nun back. Mingqiu Nun's medical skills are good, and my health is much better." Chu Liuchen glanced at her, picked up the wine pot on the table, poured a cup for himself, and slowly took a sip. "Prince, you'd better drink less." Qin Wanru looked at Chu Liuchen with a disapproving look. "My health is good," Chu Liuchen said very casually, looking at her with a very meaningful smile. His words seemed to be true, and Qin Wanru felt that she almost believed it. "Prince, you'd better take care of yourself. Even if Mingqiu Nun is here, she will definitely say so to you," Qin Wanru said implicitly. She was sincerely persuading Chu Liuchen. It was also because Chu Luchen saved her, and for her own life, she also had to thank Chu Luchen. Do you want to control me? Chu Luchen said with a smile, and the smile on his handsome face became more and more gentle. Qin Wanru even felt that this smile could be regarded as gentle. I dare not. In fact, it is not impossible. Chu Liuchen's fingers gently tapped on the table. Anyway, you will enter my Prince Chen's mansion in the future, so it is reasonable to control you first. His words were so natural, and Qin Wanru's face immediately turned red. How could he control this kind of thing first? Moreover, her so-called entering Prince Chen's mansion was also a plan. When Prince Chen liked another beauty, she would naturally abdicate, and why should she control him? Your Highness, this minister's daughter does not dare. She repeated herself. Chapter 379. Gift? Qin Wanru raised her eyes suspiciously and looked at Chu Luchen with a pair of bright watery eyes. She moved her hands a few times but found that she couldn't move at all. Of course I want a gift. I have given you a red packet for the new year. Chu Luchen looked at Qin Wanru up and down. This made Qin Wanru a little nervous for no reason. She subconsciously widened her watery eyes and looked at Chu Luchen nervously with a pair of somewhat enshrouded eyes. This kind of vigilance pleased Chu Luchen. He reached out and plucked Qin Wanru's earring. An earring fell into his hand, and then his hand fell from Qin Wanru's hand. This earring is a gift for me. Qin Wanru withdrew her hand and looked at Chu Luchen speechlessly. Look at my red packet. Chu Luchen said with a young man's pride. Qin Wanru lowered her head and opened her palm. When she saw that there was really a red packet in her palm, a big one, she didn't know what to say. She pinched the red packet into a thick stack. When she opened the red packet, she saw that it was full of bank notes. The top one was a small one of 10 taels, and then there were bank notes of 20, 50, and 100 taels. Such a stack was estimated to be about 10,000 taels. It was the first time for Qin Wanru to see so many bank notes. She was stunned and drew back her head. Child? Qin Wanru bit her lips and blinked her watery eyes. She didn't understand what he meant. Even if he gave her a red packet, it was too big. Chu Luchen didn't seem to be surprised by her shock. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. This is a red packet and also a betrothal gift from me. You are my woman, so you can't be shabby during the new year. This. I don't want it. It's too much. Qin Wanru bit her lips and reached out to take the top one of the 10 taels banknotes. She pushed the rest to Chu Luchen and said, Child, thank you for the red packet. Why, don't you like it? Chu Luchen was smiling, but there was some unknown meaning at the bottom of his eyes. Don't you want my betrothal gift? The so-called betrothal gift was naturally what Qin Wanru had promised before. The red envelope could be declined, but the betrothal gift could not be declined. It was just that this explanation was hard to accept. The so-called betrothal gift was obviously carried into the mansion in front of everyone. Who would give it in private? However, when Prince Chen did it, people felt that it was a matter of course. Prince, this is too much. Qin Wanru said helplessly. Even if it was a betrothal gift, it would only be a few thousand taels of silver. Who would give so much at once? How can this king's people be wronged? Chu Luchen elegantly brushed his sleeves and said. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and said, Are you looking down on my betrothal gift? Would she dare to look down on him? Qin Wanru was speechless. The prince was so dedicated to his work. He just wanted to be a shield, but he actually did a whole set. Seeing Qin Wanru accept the banknote, Chu Liuchen's smile became more and more charming. When he raised his hand and was about to say something, they suddenly heard someone coming up the stairs quickly. They looked at the stairs together. It was Xiao Xuanzi who came up. He went upstairs and bowed to Chu Luchen first. Then he came over and whispered in Chu Liuchen's ear. Chu Liuchen's eyes immediately became a little deeper. Where is he? He is downstairs. Prince, would you like to have a look? Xiao Xuanzi said with uncertainty. Since he guessed that I am here, let him come up. Chu Liuchen smiled. His smile was as gentle as jade. It seemed that what he heard now was originally in his plan. What about second miss? Xiao Xuanzi looked at Qin Wanru and was a little anxious. There was only such a small space upstairs, and there were no other rooms. There was only one staircase to go downstairs. At this time, the person had arrived downstairs. Even if she wanted to go downstairs, it was too late. Just upstairs. Bring my cloak up. Chu Liuchen said. Yes, I will get it right away. Xiao Xuanzi answered hurriedly. He hurriedly ran downstairs. After a while, he came up with a white fox cloak and presented it to Chu Liuchen respectfully. There was a circle of light gray fur on the edge of the gorgeous cloak, which made this extremely gorgeous cloak look very graceful and elegant. At first glance, Chu Liuchen knew it was very valuable. Chu Liuchen took it, walked to Qin Wanru's side, pulled her up, and then covered Qin Wanru with the cloak. The cloak was wide, and Qin Wanru was small, so she was covered in it. She was wrapped in the smooth and soft fox fur, which was very comfortable. After that, Qin Wanru felt that her slender waist was held. After being taken for a few steps, she sat down and moved a little. She didn't know where she was sitting. She only felt that there was something soft under her legs. It was not only the chair. Suddenly, she heard Chu Liuchen's light voice, and a hand hugged her slender waist tightly. Don't move, someone is coming. His words scared Qin Wanru and she immediately quieted down. Although she couldn't see through the cloak, she still felt that her face was burning, and only felt that the blood in her body rushed to her face. She simply buried her whole body in the fox fur and didn't move. Sensing that Qin Wanru seemed to be pretending to be dead, Chu Liuchen smiled happily. He reached out and let her head lean on his shoulder, and then put his hand on her slender waist, nodding to Xiao Xuanzi beside him. Xiao Xuanzi went down, and this time he brought up a young eunuch. He was immediately stunned when he saw Chu Liuchen sitting there with a woman wrapped tightly in his arms. The cloak was very big, but he could still see the top of the woman's head. It was a petite woman who was wrapped up and held in his arms. Chu Liuchen was just a teenager, and he was not tall enough. The person who could be held in his arms and seemed to lean on his shoulder could only be a petite woman. How could Chu Liuchen hold a woman? Who was this woman? It was not said that Prince Qin didn't like women. The palace maid sent by the Empress Dowager and the Empress didn't even survive. Then who was this woman who was held in his arms tightly and protected by him? The young eunuch was so surprised that he forgot his etiquette and stared at Chu Liuchen in front of him. He had imagined countless scenes of seeing Prince Qin, but he had never thought of such a scene. It was so shocking, almost as shocking as the scene of being assassinated today. Shichi, what's wrong with uncle? Chu Liuchen casually reached out a hand to fix Qin Wanru's hair, which was messed up by the cloak, and asked gently, as if he didn't know that no one would be able to calm down in this situation. Greetings, Your Highness. Shichi finally came to his senses, hurriedly suppressed the shock in his heart, and stepped forward to salute. Chu Liuchen narrowed his eyes, and there was a bit of coldness in his handsome eyes. Uncle is not on the mountain to worship Buddha. Is it possible that he has come down the mountain? Your Highness, our prince rarely comes down the mountain on the eve of the spring festival. I didn't expect that he would be assassinated. I heard that Prince Qin is here, so I come to ask for help. Ask for help? Chu Liuchen said casually, and he was not surprised that his whereabouts were discovered at all. Our prince just entered a bookstore and wanted to find some books to read. But someone suddenly rushed out and assassinated our prince. Our prince hid in the bookstore, but the bookstore was also on fire. Our prince was injured and escaped. When he saw the guards standing at the door of this bookstore, he knew that Prince Qin is here. Uncle wants to come in and have a rest? Chu Liuchen asked unhurriedly. Uncle? Who was uncle? Qin Wanru was in Chu Liuchen's arms, but her brain was spinning rapidly. For a moment, she couldn't remember who this so-called uncle was. In the darkness, she opened a pair of bright watery eyes and listened to them more quietly. Our prince doesn't dare to disturb Prince Chen's rest. If he disturbs Prince Chen, I'm afraid that he can't bear the responsibility. He just wants to borrow 2 guards to send our prince. Shichi said respectfully, but his eyes couldn't help falling on Qin Wanru again and again. Who was this woman who was wrapped up without a head and brain? Why had he never heard of her? If this matter was publicized, it would shock the imperial court and the public. Could your highness make use of this? Because he focused on Qin Wanru, the speech that he had prepared seemed a little dry. Disturb me? Chu Luchen suddenly smiled, and his eyes flickered. I only brought 2 guards, and I can lend them to uncle, but if I also... Shichi was shocked and didn't dare to look at Qin Wanru anymore. He hurriedly said, Don't worry, Prince Chen. Our prince is in the yard next to you. You only need to ask the 2 guards to pay more attention to our prince. You don't need 2 guards to guard our prince. This matter has been reported to the Imperial Palace, and someone from the Imperial Palace will come later. If something happened to Prince Chen, not only Shichi couldn't bear the responsibility, but also his master couldn't bear it. It was said that after Prince Chen had an accident, several princes were seriously injured. If it was all true, probably no one would believe it. It was just an accident because they were afraid to bear the responsibility. But even so, several princes were seriously injured and had to stay in the Imperial Institute of Medicine. It could be seen that no one dared to bear the responsibility, and no one could bear it. In this case, it doesn't matter. You go back first and report to your prince that I will ask 2 guards to take care of uncle and never let the bad guys hurt uncle again. As for what you saw today. Chu Luchen reached out and gently touched Qin Wanru's head. Then he put one hand into the cloak and pulled out a thin white hand. Don't worry, Prince Chen. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. Shichi didn't dare to look more, and hurriedly looked down at the ground in front of him. He was so nervous that his face was slightly pale. Prince Chen was the most temperamental. This matter was nothing in the eyes of others, but if His Highness wanted to kill him, it was really not a big deal. Even if he was the personal servant of his master, it was not a big deal. Shichi had served his prince for more than 10 years, and he couldn't be compared with ordinary little eunuchs. He knew what to say at this time. Go. Take good care of Uncle Wang. Next time I go to see Uncle Wang, I will discuss Dharma with him. Chu Luchen waved his hands slowly and said. Yes, 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 I know. Shichi was sweating and felt that he had survived a disaster. He didn't dare to look more and hurriedly went downstairs. Chapter 380. Ah! The scream of pain came from behind. It was a woman's voice. It was very light and soft. Even if he didn't see her, he would think that the woman was a very beautiful person. Even if he was curious, Shichi didn't dare to look at her. He walked faster and faster, for fear that if he walked slowly, he would provoke this man again. His master had warned him time and time again not to provoke this man. This time, he had no choice. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used this man as a cover. Qin Wanru touched her head. She was in so much pain that her tears fell down. She didn't know what hard thing she hit, and now she still saw darkness in front of her. The cloak on her head was suddenly lifted. Chu Liuchen's handsome and narrow eyes were as gloomy as water. She saw his slender and white hand covering his chin. Qin Wanru immediately came to her senses. She hurriedly smiled and reached out to rub the top of her head. Prince, who is your uncle? Another hand fell from the top of her head. After rubbing her head gently twice, he looked at her with disgust. Let Xiao Xuanzi take you to leave from the back door. As he said, another hand fell from his chin and put on Qin Wanru's slender waist. The warm touch on her waist immediately made Qin Wanru wake up. She hurriedly stood up, and the cloak slipped to one side. "Second miss, please." Xiao Xuanzi came over at the stairway, bowed his head and said, "Put on this dress. Don't let others find you." Chu Luqian stood up and put the cloak in his hand on Qin Wanru. This time, he didn't put it on casually. After putting the two belts in place, he helped her put down the hat on her head. From the outside, they could only vaguely see that she was a woman, and other things couldn't be seen clearly. Qin Wanru understood that there would be guards from the palace coming to ask questions later. It was very inappropriate for her to stay here because it would be easy to be found out. Following Xiao Xuanzi downstairs, Yujie was already waiting at the stairway. She was also wearing a gray cloak outside, which covered her clothes and face tightly. An ordinary carriage had been parked at the back door. Xiao Xuanzi arranged for them to get on the carriage. After that, the carriage turned all the way out of the alley and went to another bustling street. Then it turned out of the street, past a narrow alley, and turned to the main street. It turned several corners along the way and finally stopped in a secluded alley. "Miss, please get off the carriage," the coachman said in a low voice after stopping the carriage. Yujie jumped off the carriage first, followed by Qin Wanru. "Miss, leave the cloak behind," the coachman reminded them. After Yujie put their cloaks back on the carriage, the coachman pointed to the street in front of them and said, "Go out from here and walk for a while. You'll see the street where the bookstore was on fire." This meant that they could go back to the original path. Qin Wanru nodded and stepped aside with Yujie. The carriage moved forward again and continued to move forward. Qin Wanru took Yujie out of the alley and stood on the street. There were still a lot of people on this part of the street, but they didn't swarm forward. Instead, they gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and talked about something. Qin Wanru walked over with Yujie and found that they were talking about the bookstore fire. She couldn't help but stop. Why is there an assassin in that bookstore? Will the assassin assassinate the shopkeeper of an ordinary bookstore? There is a noble in the bookstore. I heard that he is a prince. Are you serious? Is there anything wrong with this prince? What if something really happens to him? Someone was worried. Royal bloodline? If something really happened, the person who was involved would be in big trouble. I don't know. I hope he is okay. It's just a small bookstore. It's nothing if it's burned down. She didn't know whether she was comforting herself or others. Qin Wanru rolled her watery eyes. When she was upstairs just now, she had actually figured out the identity of the prince. Prince Cheng who loved Buddhism and was the younger brother of the current emperor. It was said that Prince Cheng loved Buddhism and had liked it since he was a child. He even had the idea of becoming a monk. If Empress Dowager and the emperor hadn't suppressed him, he might have become a monk long ago. He didn't suffer any blow. He just loved Buddhism. Because of his love, he wanted to become a monk. He didn't marry until he was old. In fact, he and the emperor were not brothers born from the same mother. However, his mother died early and he was raised by Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager also liked him very much. Naturally, she wouldn't allow him to become a monk. Under the pressure, Prince Cheng seldom lived in his prince's mansion. Basically, he lived in those famous temples in the mountains. Occasionally, he would go to the palace to see Empress Dowager when he went down the mountain. In Qin Wanru's opinion, this prince was the most indifferent one. He even faded out of people's eyes. People would only think that the emperor's sons would fight for the throne, but they didn't think that this brother of the emperor was also an ambitious person. He just covered up everything with his usual performance. In her previous life, when Qin Wanru was cut in half at the waist, Prince Cheng was still a prince with excellent Buddhism. When he heard that his elder brother had an accident, he hurried to the palace to take care of him. Qin Wanru spent a lot of time in the palace in her previous life, but she didn't have much contact with Prince Cheng. However, she secretly saw something related to Prince Cheng. Therefore, she knew that Prince Cheng was not as indifferent as he looked. On that day, she passed by a secluded palace. She couldn't remember what she was going to do, but she seemed to have something to do there. There, she saw two eunuchs talking secretly, and one gave something to the other. She was shocked by their conversation. One of the two eunuchs was Prince Cheng's servant, and the other was the emperor's confidant eunuch. The eunuch of Prince Cheng gave the emperor's confidant eunuch a package and asked him to put it on the emperor's meal. It seemed that the eunuch mentioned Chu Luchen, who was the crown prince at that time. However, they were far away from each other, so their conversation was intermittent. Qin Wanru couldn't hear it clearly. But if there was really nothing wrong, why not take out the package and give it to the emperor directly? Seeing the two eunuchs acting sneakily, Qin Wanru didn't dare to move at that time, for fear of being discovered by them. If the two eunuchs knew that there was someone in the dark, they would kill her. Although this thing in the last life caused her a lot of confusion and panic at that time, in the end, she had an accident, but nothing happened to the emperor. Prince Cheng was still a prince who loved Buddhism and was very particular about brotherhood. For such a prince who wanted to be a monk, even though the royal family had never trusted the brotherhood, they were not wary of him, Sister Wanru. A voice came to her ears. Qin Wanru looked back in surprise and saw Qi Tianyu standing behind her with a surprised face. Seeing her turn her head, he found that he didn't recognize the wrong person and immediately showed a smile on his face. Was this his sincere joy for finding her? This feeling was so strange. Qin Wanru frowned slightly and looked at Qi Tianyu. She always felt that there was something she didn't know. Master, he is coming. Xiao Xuanzi went upstairs and reported. Come here. Chu Chenlu waved lazily. Chu Luchen waved his hand lazily downstairs and said. Xiao Xuanzi nodded. After a while, there was a sound of stairs and a guard leader came down. When he saw Chu Luchen, he hurriedly went forward to salute and said respectfully, Your Highness. Excuse me. Chu Luchen said casually. He raised his drunken red face and closed his eyes. It could be seen that he was a little drunk. Your Highness, I am investigating the assassination of Prince Cheng by the Emperor's order. The guard leader stood up and said. Is uncle okay? Chu Luchen reached out to touch his head and asked lazily. Prince Cheng is fine. He is just frightened. The guard leader said and frowned secretly. If this matter couldn't be found out, it would be another accident and he might not be able to explain to the emperor. Previously, several princes had met with accidents one after another, which had made people tense up for fear that there would be any trouble. Now, even Prince Cheng, who was the most quiet and inactive, had met with an accident. Someone must be plotting something in secret. Plotting what? Needless to say. The guard leader was under a lot of pressure. Since he is just frightened, it's not a big deal. I am also frightened. Chu Luchen said casually, should I go back to the palace or the mansion at this time? This question was too direct. The guard leader smiled bitterly and said tactfully, Your Highness, Empress Dowager, and the Emperor are worried about your safety. Please go back to the palace first. Such a thing had happened, and Prince Chen was involved in the center of the matter. Even though everyone thought that Prince Chen was completely unlucky to be involved in it, they had to ask. The head of the guards was also very influential. He really didn't dare to ask Prince Chen casually, so he could only say in a roundabout way that it was the most appropriate for the emperor to ask him after entering the palace. As for other things, he didn't dare to get involved. Having been in the palace for so long, the guard leader certainly knew the importance of Prince Chen. Prince Chen would be fine if Prince Chen was involved in something that happened to Prince Cheng. But if Prince Chen was involved in something that happened to Prince Cheng, it would be a big deal. Should he feel lucky that it was Prince Cheng who had an accident instead of Prince Chen who had a more noble status? Until now, the guard leader still didn't know why this extremely sick and weak Prince Chen was involved in it. Therefore, it was more difficult to find out. Uncle, don't you go back to the palace with me? Chu Luchen said with a gentle smile. Although his voice was gentle, it carried a kind of dignity that couldn't be ignored. The guard leader didn't dare to refuse to answer. Your Highness, Prince Cheng, will naturally enter the palace. That's good. I happened to think of this house and wanted to enjoy the scenery here, but I don't know why you came to my yard. I don't know when I became your neighbor. Chu Luchen stood up, raised his eyebrows, and smiled faintly. His face became more and more gentle and elegant. His words made the guard leader's face change greatly. His hand unconsciously hit on his sword, making a clear, clang, sound. Chu Luchen's eyes fell on the guard leader's sword and his face suddenly became cold. Chapter 381. The crime of assassinating Prince Chen will be exterminated. Xiao Xuanzi screamed in a gloomy voice and stood in front of Chu Luchen. Your Highness, I dare not. I really did it by accident. The commander's face turned pale and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He threw away the sword in his hand and then knelt down to kowtow. The room suddenly became quiet, which was extremely weird. The commander of the guards could even see the sweat on his forehead rolling down from his eyelashes, and his heart was in his throat. After a long while, he heard Chu Luchen's gentle voice, You didn't try to assassinate me just now? I dare not. I dare not do such an unfilial thing even if I have to die. The commander did not dare to raise his head. Get up. Chu Luchen's voice seemed to be gentle. But the commander did not dare to relax a bit. He still knelt down and said, Thank you, Your Highness. I still have something to report. Say it. Chu Luchen picked up the tea on the table and took a sip leisurely. The tense atmosphere in the room just now disappeared because of his calmness. This feeling even made the guard commander wonder if the scene from before was just a figment of his imagination. But he immediately denied this feeling from the bottom of his heart. There were still drops of sweat on the ground in front of him, which told him how amazing the momentum of Prince Chen in front of him was just now. He was much more imposing than Prince Cheng. Prince Cheng asked about you just now and deliberately said that he saw you temporarily resting in the yard next to him. He did not have a residence next to your yard as Your Highness thought. The commander carefully reported. He did not want to say this at first, but now he had to take it out to please Prince Chen in front of him. Uncle unexpectedly found me by chance, but I only went out of the palace once by chance. This fate is really not shallow. Chu Luchen said lightly. The commander suddenly felt that the sweat on his forehead began to roll down again. He only came to investigate the person who assassinated Prince Cheng, but now he felt that he seemed to have heard something he should not have heard. It was really a coincidence, as if two people who should not have met inexplicably. This was also an important reason why he specially came to see Prince Chen. Prince Cheng was assassinated, and this Prince Chen happened to appear in the area where Prince Cheng was assassinated. No matter how one looked at it, he was suspicious. Just now, Prince Cheng repeatedly said that he was lucky to meet Prince Chen, so he could be safe. Of course, this meant that Prince Chen had a lot of people, but it also meant that it was very suspicious for Prince Chen to appear here. But now Prince Chen's words were contrary to the previous meaning. It was King Cheng who deliberately set the trap. These were clearly the two princes who were the least likely to get into trouble. How did they end up together? Does my uncle know about this? The guard commander was speechless for a while, but Chu Luchen became more relaxed and asked leisurely. His Majesty already knows about this matter and is furious. The commander of the imperial bodyguards replied. Ask my uncle to investigate this matter more. We have to tell my uncle the truth. Who is so powerful that he even knows when my uncle will go down the mountain and even calculates that I will also be here tonight. Chu Luchen coughed in a low voice and did not say anything. You can leave now. My master is not in good health and will go back to the palace soon. Xiao Xuanzi said to the guard commander coldly. Yes, I will leave now. The guard commander hurriedly stood up and retreated to the side. Chu Luchen slightly closed his handsome eyes and waved his hand. The guard commander did not dare to stay any longer and hurriedly went downstairs. Sir, how is your health? Xiao Xuanzi looked at his master's pale face in fear. At this time, the blush caused by drinking had faded, and the usual paleness appeared on his face. It could be seen that Chu Luchen was not in a good condition at this time. Go back to the palace. Chu Luchen said with his eyes closed. Yes, I will go to prepare now. Seeing that his breath was stable, Xiao Xuanzi breathed a sigh of relief. Prepare the bed. Chu Luchen said casually. Xiao Xuanzi stopped and hurriedly said, Yes, I will go to find the bed right now. 2 guards were found and they were Chu Luchen's own guards. After coming up, they brought a soft bed. Xiao Xuanzi helped Chu Luchen lie on the bed and covered him with a thin quilt. Then he asked the 2 guards to carefully carry the soft bed downstairs. How is Prince Chen? When they went out of the courtyard, the door was brightly lit and a handsome young man was standing in the small courtyard beside it. Seeing the guards carrying Chu Luchen down, his face changed greatly and he hurriedly strode over. Although his clothes were plain and simple, it could be seen from his steps that he was not an ordinary person. Greetings, Your Highness. Xiao Xuanzi screamed. How is your master? Looking at Chu Luchen, whose face was as pale as snow, Prince Cheng asked anxiously. He was frightened. I am afraid that he is not very good. Xiao Xuanzi's eyes turned red and tears were about to fall down. Looking at the beautiful young man covered in the quilt, his face was indeed as pale as snow, without a trace of blood. Send him to the palace, hurry up. Prince Cheng ordered and got out of the way. After Xiao Xuanzi bowed to him, he hurriedly followed the soft bed and walked out of the alley. The alley was too small, so the carriage was parked outside. Behind them, Prince Cheng thoughtfully looked at the departing crowd with a knot between his eyebrows. Your Highness. Shiqi stepped forward and whispered. Let's also go to the palace. Prince Cheng frowned and said, Prince Chen is not in good health. I am afraid that he was frightened just now. If I had known that he was in such poor health, I would not have sent someone to disturb him just now. Shiqi was stunned and did not understand his master's meaning. He secretly glanced at Prince Cheng in astonishment. Prince Cheng meant to drag Prince Chen into trouble and even use Prince Chen's position in the emperor's mind to solve his doubts. Why did he seem to be wholeheartedly protecting Prince Chen in such a short time? Let's go to the palace. Prince Cheng seemed not to see the entangled expression on his confidante's face and just said calmly. Your Highness, please get on the carriage. Shiqi said respectfully. They went out just now and were also going to get on the carriage. They did not expect that Chu Luchen also went out and happened to bump into him. Your Highness, do you want to go to the palace first? The guard commanders stepped forward and asked. First go to the palace to report to my brother and then check on Prince Chen's health. He is still in such poor health that Empress Dowager and the Emperor are very worried. Prince Cheng sighed and said helplessly. As an elder who cared about the younger generation, it was natural for him to make such a decision. After Prince Cheng finished speaking, he got on the carriage and the carriage slowly went all the way to the palace. In front of their carriage was Chu Liuchen's carriage which was rushing to the palace. With a patient in the carriage, it could not be slow, there were so many people on the street that it was not easy to find someone. Qin Wanru was surprised to see Qi Tianyu and then Qi Baiyu, but she did not see Qin Yuru. The entrance of the bookstore had been cordoned off and people could not walk on that section of the road. But the surrounding roads had been restored to peace and it was still bustling on the eve of the spring festival. Although people who saw the scene were very flustered, there were more people who did not see it. When they talked about it, they only thought it was a small accident. The street became lively again. People who should laugh still laughed, and people who should make noise still made noise. After Qin Wanru and the Qi brothers searched for Qin Yuru again and again, they had no choice but to turn back. They had to report this to Qin Huayong and ask him to send someone to find Qin Yuru. But when they walked to Qin's mansion, they unexpectedly met Qin Yuru. Second sister, where have you been? I looked for you in many places but I couldn't find you. Qin Yuru looked very anxious. She rushed out of a street and grabbed Qin Wanru's hand, looking excited and nervous. Nervous? Chin Wanru's watery eyes glanced over the street. There were several small alleys over there and two women stepped back. Looking at their clothes, they should be servant girls. Two servant girls sent them out. It was really a big show. Where did Big Sister go? The two childs Chi and I looked for you for a long time, but we didn't see you. Chin Wanru said calmly and reached out to pull Chin Yuru's hand away. She might need to pretend in front of others, but in front of the Chi brothers, Chin Wanru really felt that it was unnecessary. Others might not know what happened in Jiangzhou, but how could the Chi brothers not know? I was also looking for you. Maybe we took a wrong turn. Chin Yuru rolled her eyes and smiled. Big Sister has been here all the time. Chin Wanru looked around and asked. How could it be? I just got here. Let's go, it's so late. We'd better go home early. Father and grandmother must be anxious. Chin Yuru said and hurried to leave this place. The more anxious she was, the less anxious Chin Wanru was. She walked a few steps and changed a place, then said slowly, Big Sister, do you know what happened on the street just now? Many people died. What happened? Chin Yuru asked subconsciously. Qi Tianyu looked up at her, and a trace of sadness flashed in his eyes, but he did not say anything. It seems that someone killed a lot of people, and it was on fire. The fire rushed to the street. We happened to be in that area, and I couldn't find anyone else, so I hid in a shop. Where did you hide, Big Sister? Did you see it? Chin Wanru said calmly. Of course I saw it. How could I not see such a big fire? I also hid in a shop, but in a panic, I didn't see clearly which shop it was. Later, I was surrounded by people, and then in order to find you, I couldn't even find the way. Now I was wandering around here, and then I saw Second Sister. It's really great. Chin Yuru said with an anxious face, as if she had been looking for Chin Wanru for a long time. But there were too many deliberate words, as if there was no trace left, which made people feel that what she said was not true. Moreover, with her character, how could she really care about Chin Wanru's life and death? It was good enough that she didn't want Chin Wanru to die, so how could she care about Chin Wanru? What she said was false. Not only did Chin Wanru have such a thought, but the Chi brothers also had the same thought. Although they did not speak, their eyes fell on Chin Yuru, and Chin Yuru's expression became stiff and awkward. Chapter 382. The fire was not big just now. Qi Tianyu suddenly said. Maybe I was wrong. I only heard people outside saying that there was a fire. Chin Yuru reacted quickly and said. Let's go, let's go. It's been such a long time. If we don't go back now, Uncle will be impatient. Qi Baiyu looked at them and said impatiently. The figure in the deep alley did not move. It was much darker than outside and they could not see clearly. It seemed that the person over there was very interested in them and just quietly watched them. Let's go. Chin Wanru nodded. They went to Chin's mansion. When they arrived at the gate of Chin's mansion, they saw Nanny Duan guarding at the gate. Seeing them coming, Nanny Duan hurriedly came to them and said, First miss, second miss, you're finally back. If you didn't come back, old grandma would come to find you in person. What happened? Chin Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked. It said that something happened on the street outside. There was a fire and someone died. General has gone out. Old grandma and Madame Shui are very worried, but it is not convenient for them to go out to find you. So they asked me to wait at the gate. Nanny Duan wiped the sweat on her forehead and said. It was the first time for them to come to the capital city and they were not familiar with the people and the place. Although they were protected by the two Chi masters, it would not be easy to find them if they were accidentally separated. Old grandma regretted it and said that she should not have let them go out of the mansion. Father is not in the mansion. Chin Yuru's eyes flashed and she asked. Yes, a guard came and asked General to leave. He said that there was an accident. Nanny Duan was not very clear about it. It was Qin Huayong who asked someone to inform old grandma about it before he left. Prince Cheng was assassinated and someone died on the street. Even his house was burned. Father was in charge of public security, so of course he had something to do with it. First miss, second miss, it's late. We should go back. Qi Tianyu and Qi Baiyu stood at the gate and said goodbye. Since you two have come together, please stay for supper. You must be tired after walking for so long, right? Madame Shui has already asked someone to prepare supper in the flower hall at the gate. It's very close. Nanny Duan was relieved to see that Qin Yuru and Qin Wanru were fine. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and pointed to a room at the door. This place was close, so it wouldn't take up too much time to go back. Big brother, let's have supper before we leave. We've been walking for such a long time and I'm really hungry. Qi Baiyu said shamelessly. He was young, and he was familiar with the Qin sisters, so he didn't think he had crossed the line. Qi Tianyu looked a little hesitant. Brother Tianyu, why don't you come in and have some with us? You can go back after you're done. Even if you're going to study, it doesn't matter. Second sister and I will go back to rest after we're done. Qin Yuru said. The four of them grew up together, and they used to call each other like this. Therefore, it was not impolite for Qin Yuru to call him Brother Tianyu. But with the two of them acting like this, it inexplicably made people feel that they were a little too close. The relationship between the two families was strained because of the relationship between the two of them, but she could still call him so naturally at this time. Thank you, Nanny Duan. Qi Tianyu said politely. You're welcome. Nanny Duan said with a smile and led them into the mansion. The lights in the flower hall had been lit, and there were a few plates of pastries on the table. The tea had also been served, and some servant girls went down to serve them. Nanny Duan went into the inner courtyard to tell old grandma and Shui Rulan that they were safe. They were sitting in the flower hall, and they came down from the kitchen on the street. Qi Baiyu, who was hungry, had eaten a few pieces of pastries in a hurry. At this time, he seemed to have recovered. Qin Wanru, where did you go? Why did you disappear all of a sudden? Qi Baiyu only had time to talk when he was half full. I was following behind you, but I couldn't see you in a blink of an eye. Then I walked in the direction you were going. Qin Wanru also ate a piece of pastry. At this time, she took a handkerchief and slowly wiped the pastry crumbs on her hands, and said slowly. Second sister, we were so close at that time. How could you not see us in a blink of an eye? Qin Yuru stared at Qin Wanru and asked. I don't know why I couldn't see you in a blink of an eye. Maybe it's because I'm a little short. Qin Wanru answered casually. If this reason was said by others, it would be insufficient. However, when Qin Wanru said this, people immediately saw her thin and weak body. Although she was a little taller, she was still not as tall as Qin Yuru. There were so many people coming and going on the street. She was thin and small, and she couldn't see others. It was reasonable that she was pushed to the side. Thinking of this, Qin Yuru's face relaxed a little. Brother Tianyu. She turned to Qi Tianyu. First Miss Qin, we are all grown up now. This is also the capital city. It's better not to call each other by their names. Qi Tianyu interrupted Qin Yuru's words. He looked up, and his face was calm and gentle. There was no ambiguity in his eyes. Brother Tianyu, there are no outsiders here. Qin Yuru's eyes turned red. She looked at Qi Tianyu with a pitiful expression and felt wronged. Qin Wanru lowered her head and fiddled with the handkerchief in her hand. A trace of cold sarcasm flashed in her eyes. Qin Yuru was really utilitarian. When she didn't need him, she would dump him. When she needed him, she would call him Brother Tianyu affectionately. It was as if she didn't know that they had nothing to do with each other now. If she continued to call him so affectionately, it would cause misunderstandings. However, looking at Qin Yuru's expression, it seemed that she was going to break up with Qi Tianyu. It was like this in her previous life. In this life, she was going to follow the old path. She wanted to draw Qi Tianyu to her side. When she needed him, she could use him to deal with her. She was really vicious. It was not convenient for Qin Yuru to do something. It was better for Qi Tianyu to do it. In her previous life, they colluded in this way. Of course, part of it was Qin Yuru herself. In her previous life, Qin Yuru was very proud and helped Qi Tianyu a lot. But in this life, Qin Yuru was in a difficult situation. She couldn't even protect herself. Would Qi Tianyu still treat her like this? In their recent contact, the first young master of the Qi family obviously wanted to draw a line with Qin Yuru. But Qin Yuru didn't want to. Qin Wanru was looking forward to their relationship. In her previous life, one was willing to be beaten and the other was willing to be beaten. They were in cahoots. In this life, she wanted to see how the two of them would deal with each other. For this, she was even willing to give them a suitable space. Even if there are no outsiders, we should control ourselves. A gentleman doesn't bully a dark room. Qi Tianyu said gently. His expression was very calm, and he looked like a gentleman. Brother Tianyu. Tears fell from Qin Yuru's eyes. She covered her tears with her handkerchief and lowered her head. It seemed that she didn't want Qi Tianyu to see her weakness. This trick worked very well in the past. Every time she used it, Qi Tianyu would give in. Qin Wanru continued to turn the handkerchief in her hand. It seemed that she didn't hear Qin Yuru's sweet call of, Brother Tianyu. Ha! Qi Baiyu smiled. He looked at his helpless elder brother and then at the delicate Qin Yuru. He couldn't help laughing out loud. He laughed and said, First Miss Qin, you and my brother are no longer together, right? Do you still want to have something with my brother? You were the one who kicked my big brother out. Do you think my big brother is good now? His words almost pierced Qin Yuru's heart. It also directly lifted the veil of affection between them. For a moment, everyone was in a different situation. Qin Yuru was the first to react. She burst into tears, turned around, and ran out. Qin Wanru raised her head helplessly and looked at Qi Tianyu. She said with a headache, First young master of the Qi family, is there anything between you and big sister? Go after her and talk to her. There is nothing between me and her. I don't know what happened to First Miss Qin. Qi Tianyu said unhappily. He didn't move and looked unwilling to move. Maybe big sister misunderstood. First young master of the Qi family, you should go and have a look. Big sister will marry into Duke Yong's mansion in the future. If she misunderstood something, it would be more difficult to explain. Qin Wanru looked outside and said. Hearing her words, Qi Tianyu stood up and said helplessly, I'll go and have a look. After saying this, he strode away and chased after her. Did I say something wrong? It was always like this. Didn't your big sister abandon my brother? Instead, it was my brother who abandoned your big sister. Qi Baiyu looked confused. He couldn't understand the situation in front of him. He turned to look at the door and then at Qin Wanru. In the past, it was Qin Yuru who abandoned Qi Tianyu. Now it is Qi Tianyu who abandoned Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru smiled and didn't hide her thoughts. What do you mean? Qi Baiyu rolled his eyes and became interested. He ran to the chair beside Qin Wanru and sat down. Nothing big. I just want to see what they want to do. Qin Wanru sneered and winked at Yujie beside her. Yujie understood and retreated to the door. She identified the direction and hurriedly chased after them. Qin Wanru, is Qin Yuru going to break off the engagement with Duke Yong's mansion? Qi Baiyu didn't quite understand Qin Wanru's words, but he suddenly thought of something and asked anxiously. It's impossible. Qin Wanru shook her head. There was a trace of mist in her watery eyes, which made her look more elegant and refined. Why do you ask? It was impossible for Qin Yuru and Di Yan to break off the engagement. They were now grasshoppers tied on a rope. Neither of them could escape. Both of them had a bad reputation and many interests were involved. They couldn't abandon each other. They were born to be husband and wife. If they couldn't be together, even God would not tolerate it. Of course, she wouldn't tolerate it either. Isn't Qin Yuru going to break off the engagement and look for my brother? Then why did she send so many betrothal gifts? It seems that she is going to give betrothal gifts to my brother. Isn't it from your mansion? But it's not from your mansion. Which family is so close to our family? In the past, Big Brother would come to your mansion whenever he had something to do. Chapter 383. Your parents are going to give betrothal gifts to your elder brother? Qin Wanru asked anxiously after calming down. Yes, they sent a lot of things, which are more valuable than the betrothal gifts to your family. Of course, they are not going to give betrothal gifts to me. Qi Baiyu said sarcastically. He was a son of a concubine, so it was impossible for him to get so much attention. Even the betrothal gifts that Qi Tianyu gave to Qin Yuru were more valuable. It could be seen how important this matter was. What did you hear? Qin Wanru straightened up and said seriously. I didn't hear any important news. They just said that these are betrothal gifts. My elder brother has been coming to your mansion a lot recently, and he has been reading all the time except for your mansion. I can't think of any other place to give betrothal gifts except your mansion. Qi Baiyu said casually. His temper was not fixed, and he didn't think much. He was a little jumpy. After saying that, he changed the topic and winked at Qin Wanru, saying, Qin Wanru, do you think your elder sister is flirting with my elder brother now? Can she still marry into Duke Yong's mansion? Qin Wanru sat still with a cold look in her eyes. She pinched her handkerchief hard and seemed to hear Qi Baiyu's words. She just replied lightly, I don't know. She understood. She completely understood. No wonder Qi Tianyu would appear in her mansion from time to time. No wonder Qi Tianyu was so polite to Qin Yuru and cared so much about her calling him, Brother Tianyu, but called her, Sister Wanru, when no one was around. It turned out that this was his plan. All the blood in her body rushed to her head. She bit her lips and suppressed the anger in her heart. He actually wanted to marry her. She was sure that Qi Tianyu wanted to give betrothal gifts to her, so Qi Tianyu frequently appeared in Qin's mansion and pretended that there was nothing between him and Qin Yuru. That was why he called her Qin Huayong when she was a child. This was his plan. Qi Tianyu actually wanted to marry her, and Qin Huayong obviously agreed. Something was crackling in her mind, like the flickering of fire, but she also felt cold in her heart. The coldness had accumulated to the bottom of her eyes. Qin Wanru, what happened to you? Qi Baiyu said a few more words to Qin Wanru, but he didn't get any response from Qin Wanru. Finally, he realized something was wrong with Qin Wanru, so he hurriedly leaned over and asked. I'm fine. Qin Wanru managed to control herself and slowly calmed down. She slightly raised her lips and said, I'm afraid that the betrothal gifts are really sent to our mansion. What do you mean? Sensing the anger in Qin Wanru's eyes, Qi Baiyu became serious and asked. I'm afraid your good big brother is plotting against me. Qin Wanru said bitterly. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she did not hide the bloodthirsty chill at the bottom of her eyes. Fight to the death. These words were still ringing in his ears, but Qi Tianyu decided to use another method. Qi Baiyu didn't understand at first, but when he did, he got angry. He banged on the table and shouted, Brother, how dare you mention this? If you weren't smart at that time, you would have been ruined by him. Look at him now, he is also flirting with Qin Yuru, and he even dares to plot against you. The teacup on the table was shaken by the slap, and the water overflowed. They were the clearest about what happened at that time. Qin Wanru was almost ruined by Qi Tianyu. If Qin Wanru didn't smash the sedan chair and attack first, Qi Baiyu didn't dare to imagine how it would end. Not only Qin Wanru, but also him. At that time, he was almost accused of having an affair. Although he was a man, unlike Qin Wanru, who was a woman and would not be doomed eternally, how could he be intact in that kind of scene? When he didn't think of this, Qi Baiyu could still treat Qi Tianyu as his big brother. But when he thought of this, he became wary of Qi Tianyu. Who mentioned this? Compared to Qi Baiyu, Qin Wanru was much calmer. Qi Baiyu sat down again, thought calmly, and said, "This should be brought up by my big brother." There were no betrothal gifts before, but they were suddenly sent later. My big brother also seemed to accept all of them, so he must have known about it. Qin Wanru was silent for a moment, and she was not surprised by this conclusion. Jiangzhou Magistrate Qi and his wife had always looked down on her, and they knew that she was an adopted child during the war. However, Qin Huayong must not have told the truth, and they must have thought that she was just an orphan, and Qin Huayong kindly took her in. With such an identity, she was not even Qin Huayong's biological daughter. In their eyes, she was not even comparable to Qin Huayong's daughter of a concubine. This was also the most important reason why Qi Rongji repeatedly bullied her in Jiangzhou, and Magistrate Qi and his wife didn't care about it. They didn't care about her at that time, and they certainly wouldn't care about her now. Even if they really wanted to marry her, they wouldn't prepare so many betrothal gifts, unless someone said something. Qi Tianyu was the only one who could speak to Magistrate Qi and his wife in the capital city. She didn't know how Qi Tianyu noticed her, and he even wanted to marry her. Or it should be said that she didn't know how Qi Tianyu noticed her. Was it her background, or did he notice her? Her family background? Her family background? Qin Wanru thought that Qi Tianyu couldn't be so resourceful to know her. Since it wasn't her family background, it must be her background that attracted the first young master of the Qi family. The green eyes of Rui and great elder princess? Or something that could let Chu Luqin know her and save her? Can you get the letter your parents sent to Qi Tianyu? Qin Wanru's eyes flashed, and she asked. I'll look for it. Qi Baiyu gritted his teeth and said. Qi Baiyu, who had calmed down, was no longer the capricious person he used to be. Qin Wanru knew it when Qi Rongji had an accident in Jingxin Monastery. Maybe he will find something when he goes back today. Qin Wanru reminded Qi Baiyu. She had provoked Qi Rongji before. With Qi Rongji's character, how could she leave without doing anything? She must have gone to talk to Qi Tianyu about this. It was not good for Qi Rongji or Qi Tianyu if Qin Yuru became the adopted daughter of Duke Xing's mansion. In this point, Qi Tianyu would definitely help Qi Rongji. But she didn't know whether it had anything to do with her. Qin Wanru was not sure about this. But there was one thing she was sure about. Qi Tianyu would not be calm tonight. What Qi Rongji said, what Qin Yuru said, what he saw and what he wanted, in this situation, it was easy for people to find something they needed. Even if they didn't take it out, it was good to prepare it. At least they wouldn't be flustered at that time. Qi Tianyu had always been a well-prepared person. But at that time, he knew that it was not Qin Yuru who would sit in the bridal sedan chair, but he didn't make things difficult for her in advance. Instead, he wanted to destroy her at the most suitable opportunity. I know what to do. Don't worry. I'll send someone to tell you once I get the news. Qi Baiyu nodded, and there was a hint of ruthlessness on his face. Several servant girls brought in 4 bowls of noodles each with a tray. Since they had reached an agreement, they didn't say anything more. They each took a bowl of noodles and began to eat. Qin Wanru had eaten before. After a few mouthfuls, she couldn't eat anymore. Qi Baiyu was very hungry, so he finished a big bowl of noodles with the soup. When he finished eating, it was getting late. Qin Wanru didn't accompany Qi Baiyu anymore. She said goodbye to him and returned to her Zhifang pavilion. When Nanny Duan went back, she told them that she would go back to report to Madame Dowager so that Madame Dowager could rest assured. After that, she asked Madame Dowager to go to bed, and they didn't have to go to her to pay their respects. Qin Wanru didn't ask the servant girls to accompany her. She went to the inner courtyard alone. She walked very slowly, waiting for Yujie to come back. Considering the time, Qi Tianyu had other plans for her, so he couldn't spend more time with Qin Yuru in private. Sister Yuru, it's okay. Don't cry. I've already told you that I won't forget you in the future. But you can't be so intimate with me in front of others. Qi Tianyu held Qin Yuru's body in his arms and comforted her softly. But when he looked out of the shadow, there was a trace of impatience in his eyes. They had been together for a long time. He didn't know whether Qin Wanru and Qi Baiyu would suspect them. Brother Tianyu, I know it was my fault. I listened to my mother. If it wasn't for that, I would have married Brother Tianyu. Qin Yuru had been having a hard time recently. She and Di Yan hated each other. But she had to tolerate it. In the beginning, Di Yan would coax her, but now he rarely said anything nice to her. He was not as good at talking as Qi Tianyu and was so gentle. Thinking of the feeling of their lips and teeth touching, Qin Yuru became softer and softer. She circled around Qi Tianyu reluctantly. Sister Yuru, let bygones be bygones. From now on, I will be your brother-in-law. We have to avoid arousing suspicion in front of others. Qi Tianyu patted her shoulder gently and said softly. I can't accept it. I can't accept it. You are mine. Why did you become like this? Qin Yuru pulled Qi Tianyu's sleeves and cried again. Then she reached out to hold Qi Baiyu's hand and let it down. Brother Tianyu, please touch my heart. I only have you in my heart. You. How can I live like this? She said. His hand was pulled down by her. Although Qi Tianyu had other plans in mind and had no feelings for Qin Yuru, he couldn't help it. He raised Qin Yuru's head excitedly and kissed her heavily. His hand moved excitedly. Qin Yuru unconsciously flattered him, and her panting and coquettish voice came out. In the dark, Yujie curled her lips. What a shameless couple. They are going to get married, but they still do this kind of thing in private. It seems that they have done this many times before and are very skilled. Chapter 384. When Yujie caught up with Qin Wanru had not arrived at Jifang courtyard and deliberately waited for Yujie to come back. Miss, the first young master of the Qi family wants to marry you. After catching up with Qin Wanru, Yujie gnashed her teeth and said the first words. The first young master of the Qi family and first miss had clearly behaved improperly, but they still dared to think of Yujie. Yujie almost rushed out and beat the adulterous couple. What did they say? Qin Wanru calmed down at this time. Miss, you know it? Yujie asked in surprise. Yes. Qin Wanru nodded and stood still. She looked into the distance. It was destined that many people would not be able to sleep today. The lights were bright, and the night was still shining. Tell me, what do they want from me? Yujie was stunned, and suddenly a strange sadness came to her heart. Sure enough, a child without biological parents could only rely on herself when she was schemed against. Looking at the beautiful side view of her miss, Yujie was so sad that she could not even speak. She had been with Qin Wanru for a long time, and she felt that Qin Wanru was more intelligent and decisive than ordinary women. Sometimes, Qin Wanru was even ruthless. But thinking of her current situation, if she was not so, she would have been trampled into the mud by others. Do they want to maintain a relationship in secret and pretend to be polite in public? As for the past, they are generous enough not to mention it, but in fact, they want Qin Yuru to help them settle this matter as soon as possible. Qin Wanru continued. She turned her head elegantly, and her eyes were like the thick night, and her smile was cold and vicious. Sure enough, either you die or I live, but I want to live. Yujie was severely shocked. She looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment and almost couldn't say a word. She was born in the nunnery, and all she had heard in the past were words of kindness to others. She had never heard such ruthless or even bloody words. That kind of bloodthirsty hostility almost rushed to her face. But she knew that this was the best way. The weak were prey to the strong. If second Miss was a little more gentle, she would have been gnawed to death at this time. "Miss, don't worry, I will protect you." The words slipped out of her mouth unconsciously. When she finished, Yujie immediately came to her senses and lowered her head in shame. Compared to the young miss, she was far too lacking. Qin Wanru smiled, and her voice sounded soft in the night, which diluted the bloody hostility just now. Although Yujie behaved very quickly and would help her deal with affairs wholeheartedly, Qin Wanru was worried that Yujie was still too soft-hearted and her own future was destined to be turbulent. If Yujie, who came from a monastery, could not be ruthless, Qin Wanru had better make arrangements for her early. If he was too kind, he would only become a stepping stone for others. "Yujie, Mingqiu Nun is going to the capital, and we have to find a nunnery to settle down." Qin Wanru stepped forward and said with a smile. The frail and slender girl was actually not big, but when her figure fell on Yujie, it inexplicably made her feel at ease. Although second Miss was young, she would definitely be able to protect her. She took a few steps forward and expressed her doubts about the meaning of Qin Wanru's words. "Miss, Mingqiu Nun is going to live in the nunnery. Why do we also have to live there? I'm still young, and I don't want to go to Duke Xing's mansion for the time being." Qin Wanru said meaningfully. No matter what Madame of Duke Xing and Qin Yuru were planning, at least she could be sure that they would not succeed. Her identity would inevitably be revealed to the world, and she would also find out about her biological parents bit by bit. But there was one thing, that she would not live in Duke Xing's mansion for the time being. But it would be unjustifiable if she did not live in Duke Xing's mansion. If she went there, she would be restricted at a young age. Even her maternal grandmother, Rui, and great elder princess, could not take her away at will. After all, she was still different from Hao, Since Rui, and great elder princess had taken Hao, back, it was no longer appropriate to mention her affairs. Therefore, she needed an opportunity, a reason to make Duke Xing's mansion have to temporarily let her leave Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Yuru's affairs were very good, and she could even delay the development of the situation. As for Qi Tianyu's affairs, she was not in a hurry. Such a big thing happened tonight, and no one was in the mood to have a happy event at this time, and the person Qin Yuru met tonight, if she guessed correctly, should be that woman. After her rebirth, she did not expect that they would meet so soon. The assassination of Prince Cheng on the eve of the Spring Festival made the imperial court furious again. The officials who were in charge of the security were scolded badly and ordered to find the murderer quickly. Another reason why the emperor was so angry was that it was said that the weak Prince Chen was also watching the scene at that time and was scared. After returning to the palace, he fainted and did not wake up until this morning. Everyone saw the emperor's love and tolerance for Prince Chen. How could the emperor not be furious when such a thing happened to Prince Chen? Among the officials who were scolded badly were Qin Huayong and Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue had not fully recovered. The so-called management was actually mainly his subordinates, and he was only responsible for the central dispatch. It was just an idle job. No one expected that such a thing would happen, and they were also scolded badly. Qin Huayong followed Chu Luiyue out of the imperial study. Standing in the corridor, he saw Chu Luiyue's increasingly gloomy face. After thinking for a while, he stepped forward and bowed. "Your Highness, what should we do next? How to investigate?" "Of course, we have to do our best to investigate it. Eldest brother, Uncle Wang, and third brother both had an accident. We have to find out the truth. Father has entrusted everything to you." Before Chu Luiyue answered, a voice with slight power came from behind. Qin Huayong turned around and saw Prince Zhou striding over with a few eunuchs. "Second brother." Chu Luiyue calmed down and said lightly. "Eldest brother, I just went to see Uncle Wang and third brother. Uncle Wang is fine and only has some minor skin wounds. But third brother's condition is not so good. But he has recovered and is resting now. I didn't see him. Chu Liuzhou walked over slowly with a serious face. What's the news, second brother? Chu Luyue asked. Nothing. I just heard that third brother met a beauty in private yesterday. Who is it? Chu Liuzhou said, I heard that third brother is very mysterious. He specially wrapped the beauty and sent her away. Are you afraid that others will know? What do you want to say, second brother? Chu Luyue took a deep breath and looked as cold as ever. Actually, I didn't say anything. I just heard that the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion returned to the mansion last night, but she left early this morning. Chu Liuzhou said with a faint smile. Now the whole capital city thought that there was something going on between him and the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, which was caused by Chu Luqian. A trace of anger flashed across Chu Liuyue's face, but he had to suppress it. I was in the palace yesterday and didn't know about it. Ah, so you didn't do it for me? I thought it was my eldest brother. I made a mistake. Chu Liuzhou said with insincerity. He made as many excuses as he could. It was obvious that he did it on purpose. Chu Liuyue's expression didn't change much this time. Second brother, if there is nothing else, I will go to deal with the business first. Eldest brother, please. Chu Liuzhou took a step back and made way for him. Chu Luyue glanced at Qin Huayong and strode away. They still had to discuss specific affairs. Qin Huayong understood. After bowing to Prince Zhou, he followed Chu Luyue out. Behind them, Chu Liuzhou narrowed his eyes and looked at Chu Liuyue's back. He murmured to himself, who did it? How could he be so sure that Uncle Wang would return to the capital city? Or is it really just a coincidence that Uncle Wang is unlucky? This was what Prince Cheng said when he went to visit Prince Cheng. Prince Cheng seemed to want to keep the peace. It seemed that he didn't want to pursue this matter anymore. If it was only Prince Cheng who had an accident and Prince Cheng said so, the emperor didn't need to urge him so much. But Chu Luqian, the invalid, was involved. It was not so simple. Chu Liuzhou didn't go out of the palace last night. He just wandered outside and came back early. When he came back, he knew that something had happened. When he went out again, it had already been over. Until now, Chu Liuzhou still didn't know who they were going to deal with yesterday. If they were dealing with Prince Cheng seemed to be fine. His minor injury was not even comparable to the injury they had suffered at that time. If they were dealing with Chu Luqian, the invalid was in a precarious condition. No one knew when he would be unable to hold on. So they didn't have to plot against him. However, Chu Liuzhou was also secretly vigilant. When Chu Luqian had an accident, he made such a scene for fear of being responsible. Now Chu Luqian fainted again. Could it be that someone used Chu Luqian to plot against him? Thinking of this, he immediately felt that it made sense. Chu Luqian was not important. What was important was his position in the hearts of his father and imperial grandmother. Someone used Chu Luqian to deal with him. As for the woman, it was really hard to tell whether it was true or not. The invalid could barely protect himself, but he still dared to think about a woman. He was courting death. It was true that the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion came to the capital city. In fact, he had been informed. What he said just now could be regarded as a half-true and half-false test. Send some more medicinal materials to Prince Chen. Tell him that it's my and mother's will. Don't send them directly to Prince Chen's people, but to Imperial Grandmother. I heard that a nun with good medical skills has come to Imperial Grandmother's side. It's all because of her medical skills that third brother can wake up today. Ask her to take a look at the medicinal materials before giving them to Prince Chen. Chu Liuzhou ordered. His order was very reasonable. It not only flattered the Empress Dowager, but also let the Empress Dowager use these medicinal materials without worry. Moreover, it also showed his innocence. Even Prince Zhou, the legitimate son of the Empress, had to behave like this at this time. He couldn't be too far away or too close. Yes, Your Highness. A eunuch beside him answered. Qin Wanru heard Madame Dowager's summon after breakfast. Because she was worried that Qin Wanru would sleep late yesterday, she specially told her not to go to greet Madame Dowager in the morning today. When she arrived at Madame Dowager's courtyard and saw the aggressive people in the hall, she walked up to them with indifferent eyes and bowed, standing behind Madame Dowager. Chapter 385. Madame Dowager sat above with a sullen face. Sitting opposite her were old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion, Countess Yong, and Di Fenglan. Seeing Qin Wanru come in, they all looked at her unkindly. Qin Wanru glanced around and found that Shui Rulan was not here. She was afraid that people from Duke Yong's mansion would disturb Shui Rulan, so she deliberately asked her to stay away. Madame Dowager seemed to be a little weak because of this, so she asked her to come here to support the situation. After saluting Madame Dowager nodded and motioned her to stand behind her. Before she stood still, Di Fenglan had started to attack Qin Wanru first. Second, Miss Qin, did you force my aunt to commit suicide? Qin Wanru stood behind Madame Dowager, looked up at Di Fenglan unhurriedly, and sneered in her heart. No wonder so many people from Duke Yong's mansion came here. They wanted to suppress our mansion by force. They planned to attack the young and the old one by one. How about Madame D's matter? You can ask several servant girls and old maids who were present at that time. If you don't believe it, you can ask them separately. Qin Wanru said with indifferent eyes. We are all servants in your mansion. You can say whatever you want. My aunt was fine. Why did she suddenly take things too hard? Now she is lying on the bed half dead and can't even speak. It's all because of you. Di Fenglan frowned and said with hatred. You're right. Miss D, I don't understand your words. Qin Wanru said coldly. She glanced at Countess Yong and old Madame. Seeing that they were silent with sullen faces and let Di Fenglan attack them, Qin Wanru's eyes were cold. Qin Wanru, don't pretend in front of me. Madame Shui wanted to pull my aunt down from the position of legal wife and replace her. My aunt retreated again and locked herself in the backyard, but Madame Shui still refused to stop. You helped Madame Shui to plot against my aunt and forced my aunt to commit suicide. Even if this matter is reported to the court, you must give my aunt justice. Di Fenglan raised her voice and sneered, aggressive. In this way, it seemed that it was Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru who harmed Madame D. Madame D retreated again, which made her appear to be generous and gentle. This was really a reversal of right and wrong. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart, and her icy eyes fell on Di Fenglan. She smiled faintly and said, Miss D, where did you get this information? Are there any witnesses? If there is no witness, can we say that Miss D deliberately framed our family? Is this how Miss D usually learns her manners? Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Wanru, how dare you? Di Fenglan's face turned red and she said angrily. If she really had such a rumor, her reputation would be ruined. Recently, the mansion was planning to arrange a marriage for her. If this news were to spread out, the marriage would no longer be discussed. Miss D, it's hard to say whether I'm being presumptuous or not. I don't know who you're relying on to shout at my grandmother. Qin Wanru's cold eyes fell on Di Fenglan. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to see through other people's hearts, which made Di Fenglan feel guilty. What happened last night had already been spread to Duke Yong's mansion. How could she not know it? At this time, it was also her grandmother's idea to put the blame on her. At this time, being suppressed by Qin Wanru again, she suddenly blushed. Qin Wanru, you. Seeing that she was in a weak position, she became more and more anxious and snapped. Qin Wanru interrupted her mercilessly, curled her lips and said, Miss D, I respect you as a miss from an aristocratic family of dukes and marquises, but I don't know why you are so rude. In front of so many people, you repeatedly shouted my name. Why did you come here? Her words made Di Fenglan feel ashamed and angry. She had always been arrogant and directly called Qin Wanru's name many times. But now in the hall, so many people heard, Qin Wanru called her Miss Di, while she shouted Qin Wanru's name. It was obvious who was superior. Di Fenglan originally came with full confidence, but she did not expect that Qin Wanru would be so strong and eloquent. Qin Wanru's words made her speechless. She had never suffered such anger in her own mansion, not to mention being reprimanded by Qin Wanru in front of her mother and grandmother. For a moment, she was so angry that she heavily patted the table beside her and was about to stand up angrily. Fenglan, don't. Countess Yong saw that it was not good and hurriedly scolded in a low voice. After suppressing Di Fenglan, she looked at Qin Wanru with gloomy eyes and said coldly, "Has second Miss Qin always been so sharp-tongued? No wonder my sister suffered such a big loss. Now she is forced to live a life worse than death. Madam Dowager, if you really can't keep my sister alive, our two families will separate peacefully." The so-called separation meant that everyone got married and parted peacefully. When a husband and wife were not on good terms, the man was always strong. Basically, he would be divorced or given the cold shoulder. Especially in this kind of aristocratic family, there would never be a separation. The so-called separation usually meant that the man would suffer losses. Madame D was Qin Huayong's legal wife. The most likely reason for the man to suffer losses was that he favored his concubine to the detriment of his wife. Although a co-wife was also a wife, her status was still slightly inferior to that of a legal wife. Saying that he favored his concubine to the detriment of his wife not only pushed Qin Huayong to the teeth of the storm, but also made Shui Rulan bear all the blame. Duke Yang's mansion's way of advancing by retreating could be said to kill two birds with one stone, which was extremely vicious. The first half of this sentence was said to Qin Wanru, which meant that Qin Wanru could reply, but her reply could not involve the separation. Countess Yong said this to Madame Dowager, and as a junior, she could not intervene casually. The only thing she could refute was what Countess Yong said to her just now. "Madam, please forgive me. I'm not sharp-tongued. It's just that everything needs evidence. Our mansion has evidence, but do you have evidence for what Miss D said just now?" Qin Wanru took over the topic unhurriedly and calmly shifted the focus of the topic to the previous thing. It could be seen that Madame Dowager did not expect that Countess Yong proposed a separation. Madame Dowager should not have thought of this way of advancing by retreating. Stunned, she was thinking about countermeasures at this time. Qin Wanru took over the topic, which gave her some time to think about how to deal with this matter. "Evidence? Are you talking about the servants in your mansion?" Countess Yong sneered and said to Qin Wanru. Originally, she did not want to argue with Qin Wanru and directly confront Madame Dowager. However, Qin Wanru came to find her, which made her unable to suppress the anger in her heart for a moment. Seeing her daughter being defeated just now, Countess Yong was already burning with anger. "Madam, I don't quite understand what you mean. It happened in our mansion, and it was an accident. Naturally, only the people in our mansion saw it. Do you hope that the people of Duke Yang's mansion would be prepared early and watch the whole scene?" Qin Wanru looked at Countess Yong calmly, and was not suppressed by her momentum. Hearing this, Countess Yong was so angry that her face turned blue. This bitch meant that she wanted her to set up early and deliberately help Madame D to put on a show. Since they are all from your mansion, what they said is of course the master's idea. Where did you get the evidence? After calming down, Countess Yong suppressed the anger in her heart and said with a sneer. After all, she was not Di Fenglan. Before they came here, they had already discussed this matter. They insisted that they were all from Qin's mansion, and they would not admit it. Today, they would ask Qin's mansion to give them an explanation. Not only Shui Rulan, but also Qin Wanru, they would not get any benefits. Based on the identity of Duke Yang's mansion and Madame D's current miserable situation, as long as they insisted, Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru would not get any benefits. "Madam, your words are too arbitrary. But since you said so, there is really a witness." It is said that the doctor who treated Madame D is also familiar with Duke Yong's mansion, and it seems that he was introduced by Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru had already prepared and knew that Duke Yong's mansion would not let it go. Qin Huayong also knew about this. The doctor who made a false testimony yesterday did not leave the mansion last night and was directly detained. Who would believe the words of a doctor who had an accident? Countess Yong said coldly. Although old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion did not speak, her eyes fell on Qin Wanru as if they were solid, like a venomous snake, waiting to bite Qin Wanru to death when she was weak. Madam, whose words do you think are trustworthy? Qin Wanru raised her head and did not panic. Of course not from your mansion, and he has a good reputation. Madame of Duke Yong said coldly. She did not believe that others could see that she had bitten so hard. Although Qin's mansion was a new noble, it was also an aristocratic family. This kind of thing could not be cleared even if it was brought to the court. What's more, Qin Huayong could not afford to lose face. If this thing was brought to the court, the inner court would be in chaos, and Madame D was now in such a miserable situation, which was enough to make many people sympathize with Madame D and blame Madame Shui. Madame Shui might as well give up the baby in her belly. There is another doctor, who is not from our mansion, and he has a good reputation. If Madame wants to see him, you can see him. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said. Another doctor. Your Qin's mansion has prepared a lot of doctors. Could it be that you have known that my sister would be forced to this point, so you have prepared doctors in advance? Countess Yong said sarcastically. This doctor has a good reputation, and he is not from our mansion. Can't he be a witness? Even if we go to the hall, he can also be a witness. Qin Wanru said lightly. Then let's go to the court. Old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion took over the topic in a cold voice. She stood up and said to Madame Dowager, since this matter cannot be cleared, let's go to the court. As soon as she said this, Madame Dowager's face changed dramatically. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Madame Dowager's hand, and her hand trembled slightly. Chapter 386. They were forcing Qin's mansion to make concessions. Moreover, they wanted to drag Shui Rulan into the trouble and bring it to the court. If Madame D went to court, Shui Rulan also had to go to court. With Shui Rulan's current health, plus the depression and shame in her heart, wouldn't it kill her? Duke Yong's mansion really made a good plan. Madame D's current appearance had already made people feel sorry for her. Even if there was evidence, many people would stand on Madame D's side. In addition, Duke Yong's mansion would help her, and even Duke Xing's mansion might help her. Even the court would not be so accurate. The doctor was the only one who could be counted as a witness, but if something happened to the doctor, there would be no more convincing witness. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. Last night, Duke Yong's mansion did not directly make trouble. It seemed that they were discussing how to deal with it. They might even get the guarantee of someone. Today, they came with people aggressively. Madame D had such a big thing yesterday. Of course, they would report it to Duke Yong's mansion immediately. Old Madam, please take care. In fact, there is still a witness. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and took 2 steps forward. Old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion raised her head high and said nothing with arrogance. Di Fenglan sneered and said, Second Miss Qin, there is another witness. Why don't you call him out? This person's status is too high. I can't call him out. Qin Wanru said indifferently. Old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion looked at Qin Wanru's calm face. Her heart skipped a beat and she suddenly felt that it was not good. Who? Countess Yong's face turned serious and she said hurriedly. In fact, I saw what happened in Madame D's yard yesterday. I also saw those old maids reply. There was also a distinguished guest who replied to the doctor. He happened to come to our mansion yesterday and saw the whole thing. In fact, this matter doesn't need to be brought to court. As long as this distinguished guest says something, it will be clear. Qin Wanru said indifferently. Who else? Countess Yong gritted her teeth and said. Prince Yu happened to be in our mansion yesterday. If you don't believe me, you can ask him. Qin Wanru said generously. Her words made the faces of several people of Duke Yong's mansion stiffen. None of them expected that Prince Yu would witness the whole process of this matter, and it seemed that Prince Yu had seen the whole process of Qin Huayong's interrogation of the witness. Old Madam, if you don't believe me, you can go to Prince Yu's mansion to ask. Madame Dowager also reacted at this time, raised her head and said bluntly. Go to Prince Yu's mansion to ask. Moreover, he knew that Madame D reaped what she sowed. Countess Yong looked at old Madame and felt embarrassed. It was possible that she would be reprimanded if she asked. Old Madame's face was gloomy. Originally, she wanted to bite the Qin's mansion to death. She thought that the Qin's mansion would not dare to fight with them and would definitely make concessions again and again. Of course, they did not really want to go to court, but if they took this as a condition, the Qin's mansion would definitely compromise. At that time, no matter what conditions they put forward, Qin's mansion would have to agree to them. But they did not expect that this thing was seen by Prince Yu. With Prince Yu as a witness, no matter what they said or what they insisted, it would be useless, and it might even affect Duke Yong's mansion. Although Madame D was the daughter of old Madame, she had little to do with Countess Yong. In contrast, Countess Yong was certainly afraid that this matter would affect her children, and she was afraid that this matter would affect Duke Yong's mansion. If this was really a farce made by Madame D, and the purpose was to harm Shui Rulan, with Prince Yu's testimony, Duke Yong's mansion would lose face. And her daughter's marriage would be affected. Countess Yong could not bear it anymore. Old Madame, did Prince Yu really see it? Old Madame's eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face coldly, capturing the slightest expression on Qin Wanru's face. Qin Wanru raised her head and looked directly at Old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion. She said calmly, Old Madame, if you don't believe me, my grandmother can send someone to ask Prince Yu now. Last night, Prince Chen was assassinated, and even the most favored Prince Chen was involved. At this time, Prince Yu must be investigating what happened yesterday. At this time, old Madame of Duke Yong did not dare to bother him with this kind of thing. Looking at Qin Wanru's calm face, old Madame wavered. This should be true, right? Otherwise, Qin Wanru would not dare to say such words, and it seemed that she was going to call someone over to confront immediately. Old Madame of Duke Yong had already known what happened to Madame D last night, and the doctor was sent after they hinted. Unexpectedly, it was Madame D who had the accident. Old Madame, I want to see my daughter. Old Madame reluctantly moved her eyes away from Qin Wanru's face, looked at Old Madame, and her voice softened imperceptibly. Nanny Duan, take Old Madame to Yulan Pavilion. Old Madame nodded and said with a sigh of relief, knowing that the crisis was over. My daughter had such an accident, and I heard that she could not speak. Yuru should not be locked up anymore, right? Old Madame said coldly. Of course, she meant to let Qin Yuru out. Old Madame, don't worry. Big Sister had already been released from confinement at that time. Father originally wanted Big Sister to serve Madame D. Qin Wanru said with a smile. This was really expected. Now it was not a matter of not allowing Qin Yuru to serve Madame D, but whether Qin Yuru had the face to go there or not, and whether she dared to go there. Let's go. Old Madame turned and said. The people of Duke Yong's mansion followed her and walked out of the door. Seeing the people of Duke Yong's mansion leave, Madame Dowager breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, she secretly wiped her cold sweat. Prince Yu was indeed there yesterday, but he didn't see much. If she asked him to be a witness, he would not be a powerful witness, not to mention whether he was willing to or not. Moreover, with Prince Yu's identity, how could he casually care about this kind of inner court matter? This was also a very puzzling thing after Qin Huayong and Old Madame discussed last night. They knew that Duke Yong's mansion would come to make trouble, but they did not know to what extent they would make trouble. Qin's mansion would make appropriate concessions, but if it really involved too much, Old Madame and Qin Huayong would absolutely not give in. but this kind of refusal might cause a rift between the two families. If this matter was really brought to the court, Qin Huaiyong would definitely not get a good result, and might even be hindered in his official career. If he could not even deal with his own backyard matter, how could he deal with the affairs of the world? He might even be criticized by the imperial censor, so old madam and Qin Huaiyong could not make a decision for a while. Later, something happened outside. Before Qin Huaiyong went out, he had told old madam that if people of Duke Yong's mansion came, they must delay it until he came back. But they did not expect that Qin Huaiyong had not come back since he went out early this morning, and Duke Yong's mansion came to them aggressively, as if they were going to tear apart and make trouble. Fortunately, Qin Wanru's words just now made old madam of Duke Yong's mansion give up the idea of making trouble. Of course, it was all thanks to Qin Wanru. Madame Dowager felt sad for a while when thinking that a little girl like her could be so calm in front of so many people of Duke Yong's mansion and keep a straight face so that she could send old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion away. She reached out and pulled Qin Wanru to sit down beside her. She waved her hand, and the servant girls and old maids in the room all left. Yujie also retreated to the door, looked outside, and stood by the door. Wanru, will they stop just like this? Madame Dowager sighed in distress. At this time, she couldn't find anyone to talk to. In addition, Qin Wanru's behavior just now made her think highly of Qin Wanru. At this time, she discussed her worries with Qin Wanru. Grandma, don't worry. They will not make trouble for the time being. Qin Wanru comforted old madam softly. Temporarily? Will they still make trouble from time to time? Old madam frowned tightly. Grandma, whether they will make trouble in the future depends on the situation, but at least for the time being. Later, Grandma, please send more servants to serve Madame D in the yard, and then remove the old maids who guard the door, so that Yulan Pavilion can be restored to the past. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said. Madame D's current situation was basically ruined, and she was ruined in the hands of her daughter. But no matter what, she was really miserable now. What Qin's mansion should do now was to treat Madame D very well and value her very much. They could not let Duke Yong's mansion take advantage of this matter. This is what your father and I mean, but... Old madam said awkwardly. Grandma, is it because there is no servant around Madame D? Qin Wanru said with confidence, big sister doesn't need to be confined. You can let her serve Madame D. In this way, Duke Yong's mansion will also be satisfied. It is supposed to let your big sister serve Madame D. But just now Yuru said that she was frightened yesterday, and now she can't get up. Old madam said with a headache. It was a natural thing for a daughter to take care of her sick mother, but Qin Yuru was also sick at this time, and it seemed that she was seriously ill. However, if no one took care of Madame D, it would be somewhat unreasonable. After all, there was still Qin Wanru in the mansion. Although Qin Huaiyong had ordered Qin Wanru to have nothing to do with Madame D, she was now an elder, and now she was so miserable, and Qin Yuru was sick. But Madame D had never been kind to Qin Wanru, and old madam was worried that Qin Wanru would be wronged by Madame D. Madame Dowager and Qin Huaiyong both knew that she reaped what she sowed this time, but she still had to pretend to show it to others. Otherwise, the people of Duke Yong's mansion would pick up another topic and talk nonsense. Grandma, I will serve Madame D. Qin Wanru knew old madam's dilemma, and said with a smile. You go. Old madam frowned and hesitated, and then shook her head. You'd better not go. But now I am the only junior in the mansion. If I don't go, it will be unreasonable. Qin Wanru analyzed with a smile. Her words made old madam speechless for a while. She lowered her head and took a deep breath. Old madam was really afraid that Madame D would do something evil again. Even though Madame D couldn't move now, old madam was still worried. Grandma, don't worry. I will go. I believe that Madame D will ask me to come back soon. Qin Wanru smiled confidently. Her refusal to go and Madame D's refusal to let her go were totally different. Chapter 387. Your big sister. Old grandma didn't understand what she meant. Grandma, although big sister is sick, she can't be compared with Madam D now. Since I'm going, how can big sister, as her biological daughter, not go? Even if she is sick and can't serve Madam D in person, she should show her sincerity and let big sister live in Yulon Pavilion. When Madam D sees big sister, she will be in a good mood and get better. Qin Wanru said softly. Qin Yuru didn't want to go, so she insisted. Let your big sister move to Madam D's place. Madam Dowager thought for a while and thought it was a good reason. She nodded and sighed. That's okay. Anyway, Madam D is your big sister's mother. Even if Madam D asked for it, big sister can't let go of it. Since grandma agrees, send someone to inform big sister now. Qin Wanru suggested with a smile. Coincidentally, several people from Duke Yong's mansion are here. If big sister goes there now, she can definitely shut them up. What she said was reasonable. Several people from Duke Yong's mansion were here to make trouble now. If Qin Yuru went there, she could shut them up so that they wouldn't say they didn't care about it. Old grandma agreed and sent an old maid to call Qin Yuru. Seeing the old maid leave, Qin Wanru's eyes flashed with coldness. Sure enough, father didn't tell grandma all the truth. Grandma obviously didn't know that Qin Yuru was the culprit who hurt Madam D. She wanted to kill her biological mother, but now she didn't die and lived with Madam D in a half-dead state. Let's see what Qin Yuru would do. Qin Yuru must be scared in her heart, otherwise she wouldn't pretend to be sick to avoid it. She wanted to avoid it, but this time she wouldn't let her. Let's see how she would get along with Madam D and how she would make trouble. When Qin Yuru arrived at Yulon Pavilion, several people from Duke Yong's mansion were still here. They had sent someone to invite them, but Qin Yuru said that she was sick and would come late. This delay lasted for a long time. If it weren't for Madam D's current condition, old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion had to say something to Qin Yuru personally. People from Duke Yong's mansion would have gone back. Looking at Qin Yuru who came late, old Madam's mansion became more gloomy. Grandmother. Seeing old Madam, Qin Yuru's tears fell immediately. She let out a sad cry, but could not say anything. She knelt down in front of old Madam, put her hands on old Madam's knees, and burst into tears. Old Madam looked at her daughter, who was lying on the bed, and then looked at Qin Yuru, who was crying with grievance, and her eyes turned red. She loved her daughter the most. When she was young, her daughter was immature and made mistakes, so she had to marry far away. Now that she finally came back, she was in such a miserable state. How could she not feel hurt? She reached out to hold Qin Yuru's head. Her previous annoyance turned into sadness and she wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Seeing that they hugged each other and cried bitterly, Countess Yong also pretended to wipe the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. Fenglan, support your cousin. Your grandmother is old and can't bear such sadness. Fenglan came over and helped Qin Yuru up. She stood up. Sobbing, Qin Yuru sat down on a chair at the side. Tears fell down her cheeks. She did not look well today. She did not know if it was because of the lack of rouge, but her pale face was a little yellow. Well, what happened to your mother? Old Madam had been through this. She had wiped her tears and asked in a low voice. Grandmother, mother is. Qin Yuru cried so hard that she couldn't speak. She was at a loss because her biological mother had become like this. Countess Yong persuaded her again, and then Qin Yuru told her what happened at that time. In her narration, Madame D's previous events were very clear. As for the later events, she was much more vague. She only said that Madame D might have hung herself for a long time. When she came in and saved Qin Yuru, she was already like this. No one knew why. After she finished telling the story, old Madame became silent. Nanny Zhou, who stood in front of the bed, looked at Qin Yuru and then looked at old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion. She shrank to the side of the bed and stood there with her head down. Of course, she could distinguish which words of first miss were true and which were false, but she didn't dare to say anything. Good girl, you have suffered a lot. You have to serve your mother when you are not in good health. But if you are not with your mother, the girl over there will come over. I am really worried about that tricky girl. Old Madam comforted Qin Yuru in a low voice. Grandmother, let mother go back to Duke Yong's mansion with me. I don't want to live here. Qin Yuru held the handkerchief and cried again, begging. Looking at her pitiful and pale face, and thinking of Qin Wanru's delicate and radiant face before, Old Madam felt suffocated. She only felt that it was Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru's fault that her daughter fell into such a situation. If Shui Rulan did not become Qin Huayong's co-wife, if Qin Wanru did not make so much trouble, this would not happen. Old Madam pitied her daughter and her granddaughter. She felt that everything was the fault of others, but she also felt guilty about this matter. She even had a plot in it. She didn't expect that it would hurt her daughter in the end. For a moment, she felt sad and her eyes turned red. Yuru, you can't go back for the time being. Didn't your mother tell you before? Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion also likes you very much and has almost approved of you. The room was full of people of Duke Yong's mansion. This time they came here with their confidants, so Old Madam made it clear. These things were Madam D's plan, and Old Madam thought it was good. This matter was good for Madam D, Qin Yuru, and Duke Yong's mansion. Grandma. I know, but mother. Seeing Old Madam comforting her again and again, Qin Yuru felt relieved. It seemed that her grandmother didn't know it, which was really great. She sniffed and looked at Old Madam with grievance, as if she didn't want to say anything else and only cared about her mother. Seeing this, Old Madam felt heartache and sad. Her voice became more and more gentle. Your mother is like this now, but she still wants you to be a good person. Grandma will tell the people of Qin's mansion to let you out and not lock you up anymore. You can find a way to contact Duke Xing's mansion. It's better to ask them to take you to Duke Xing's mansion. If you are in Duke Xing's mansion, your father will not dare to treat your mother badly. But I can't stop worrying about my mother. Qin Yuru cried with red eyes. Even if you can't let it go, you have to let it go. Remember, only when you are well, your mother will be well, and today's hatred can be avenged. Seeing that she still cared about Madam D so much, Old Madam felt gratified and sad, but she was afraid that she would make a mistake, so she scolded her with a cold face. But mother is like this, who can I talk to about this matter? Qin Yuru still cried like a pear blossom in the rain, as if she had nothing to live for when Madam D was like this. You can talk to Nanny Huang. Old Madam said. She came here today to talk to her about this matter. Talk to Nanny Huang. Nanny Huang who teaches education. Qin Yuru was stunned for a moment. Nanny Huang didn't seem to be very good to her before, and it seemed that she was not on her side. If it weren't for her mother's words when she was discharged from the hospital this time, she would never think that Nanny Huang was on her side. But even if Nanny Huang came up with the idea, could she really believe her? Qin Yuru looked at Old Madam with a puzzled face and looked very confused and pitiful. Yes, just talk to Nanny Huang. I have sent someone to talk to her. Anyway, you can talk to her in the future. Seeing Qin Yuru like this, Old Madam felt more and more pity for her. Originally, of course, she also wanted Di Yan to marry Qin Yuru as soon as possible. But since Madam D told her her previous plan, she also thought it was better. Compared with marrying into Duke Yong's mansion in a hurry, if Qin Yuru could get such a background, it would be a matter of rising to the sky in one step. Not only would she benefit, but her own Duke Yong's mansion would also benefit a lot. After all, Qin Yuru would marry Di Yan in the future. No matter what her identity would be in the future, the marriage had been set long ago. In fact, it was not difficult to control Nanny Huang. She didn't control her before because she didn't think it was necessary. But now that Madam D was in trouble, Nanny Zhou was too busy to take care of Madam D, so she naturally had no time to help Qin Yuru. Old Madam thought of Nanny Huang, the etiquette instructor who had already entered the mansion to teach Qin Yuru. Last night, she had already sent someone to bribe Nanny Huang's family. Just now, she just sent someone to inform them. At this time, if she sent someone to Qin's mansion again, she would not be valued again. It was better to use the original ones. Nanny Huang could become an etiquette instructor, so she naturally had extraordinary means. Previously, Countess Yong had a good relationship with her and treated her very well. Now she would bribe Nanny Huang's family again. Compared with Nanny Zhou, Nanny Huang was more knowledgeable and had more means. She would definitely be a good helper for Qin Yuru. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion thought so and also did so. She couldn't let her poor granddaughter be bullied in Qin's mansion. Will Nanny Huang help me in the future? Qin Yuru asked cautiously. Looking at such a cautious granddaughter, Old Madam felt like being pricked by needles and became more and more resentful. Don't worry, Nanny Huang will help you. She may not have done her best in the past, but she won't in the future. Old Madam whispered, and a trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. Yes, Grandma. Yuru will listen to Grandma. Qin Yuru said obediently. Yuru, you have to take good care of your mother. When your mother is well, Grandma will definitely let them pay back what they owe us first. Old Madam said sternly. But now Mother is like this. Qin Yuru turned her head and looked at Madame D, who was lying on the bed. She didn't know whether she was alive or not. She was secretly happy, but showed a wronged expression. Chapter 388. Grandma, what can you do? Qin Yuru rushed to the bedside and looked at Madame D, who was crying with grief. She looked pale, which made her look more delicate and weak. Di Fenglan also sympathized with her. She came over and squatted in front of Madame D's bed with her. She comforted her in a low voice, "Cousin, don't cry. Grandma has arranged everything. An imperial physician will come here soon. Today my father went to the palace early to invite an imperial physician." Imperial physician. An imperial physician will come to treat my mother? Qin Yuru was shocked and raised her head hurriedly. Her hand that touched the head of the bed trembled. If her mother was really fine, how could she live? Others didn't know, but she knew that her mother was seriously injured because of her. But in that case, she had no choice. If her mother was not seriously injured, Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan would be fine. This should not be her mother's idea, right? Now the reason why things became like this was that her mother did not plan well and made many loopholes. Otherwise, how could she become like this while Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru were fine? Yes, it was Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru's fault. If it were not for them, her mother would not have come up with this method to deal with them. So even if her mother recovered, she would not blame her. Thinking of this, she was not so flustered. Yes, invite Imperial Physician Li from the palace. He has excellent medical skills. Your mother will be fine. Old Madam thought that Qin Yuru was still sad, so she comforted her. Qin Yuru did not speak this time. She just wiped her tears and nodded. Countess Yong, who did not like her very much, saw her so filial lying in front of Madame D's bed, and her heart softened involuntarily. She came over and helped her up with Di Fenglan. Well, don't cry. If you have any problems in the future, you can find a way to spread the news. Your grandma and I will definitely support you. If you need anything, if you want us to send it to Duke Xing's mansion, Aunt will also help you. Thank you, Aunt. Qin Yuru cried and was about to bend down again. Countess Yong hurriedly reached out to hold her. Ask everyone else to leave. Old Madam looked at the nanny beside Countess Yong and said. Yes, Old Madam. Countess Yong knew that Old Madam felt that her confidants were not considered enough, so she sent them all out. She did not dare to disobey. She waved her hand and all the servants left. Nanny Zhou looked around and saw that she was the only servant. She lowered her head and wanted to leave, but was stopped by old Madam. You stay. Yes. Nanny Zhou quickly turned around and stood in front of Madame D's bed. The room was full of people from Duke Yong's mansion, and she had been pushed to the side. Yuru, old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion has confirmed that you are her granddaughter. She has sent someone to Duke Yong's mansion to ask about you, and I also did what your mother said. Last night, I specially asked someone to send a message to old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madam said in a low voice with a sullen face. This matter was of great importance. Old Madam was very careful even if she was a trusted subordinate. What does old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion mean? Qin Yuru looked at old Madam excitedly and asked. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion means that she has no right to intervene now, and Yuru can't get out of the mansion recently, so she can't meet her. Otherwise, she can say that she likes Yuru, directly recognize Yuru as her granddaughter, and then take her away. Now we can only. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion frowned and said. What can we do? We can only wait for the right time. There must be a chance for you to meet old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Although old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion has a good impression of you before, she didn't say that she wants to recognize you as her granddaughter. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion frowned more. Speaking of this matter, it was too slow. If they had acted faster, they could directly recognize Qin Yuru when they met, and then they could directly intervene in the Qin's mansion when there was something wrong. Now even if old Madam of Duke Xing wanted to intervene, she was powerless. Qin's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion had nothing to do with each other. Qin Yuru bit her lip and felt very unwilling. Madame D was in such a state that she could not get out of the mansion, nor could she go to other mansions' banquets in the capital city. Even if she wanted to meet old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, she had no chance. Looking at Madame D's state, she didn't know when she would wake up. Would she never have a chance? Thinking of this, she felt desperate. She almost reached the top in one step, but she could only see it, but couldn't touch it. She was unwilling. At this time, she even felt regret. If she had known that Madame D's state of being neither alive nor dead would affect her, she would have either killed more quickly or not done it at that time. Yuru, this matter is not urgent. You take care of your mother for a few days. If you leave these days, what will your mother do? She only has you as her daughter. If you leave, if the people over there want to hurt her, no one will help her. Take care of your mother first and then make a plan. Of course, she meant to treat her daughter's injury first. Even if she couldn't speak in the future, at least she should be well, especially during the period of the Spring Festival. She should let Madame D take good care of her. With her daughter serving her, she would be in a good mood and get better quickly. Qin Yuru couldn't refuse even if she wanted to. She felt depressed, but she had to pretend to cry with joy and nodded repeatedly. Grandma, Yuru will listen to you. Good girl, it's good that you can think like this. When your mother gets better, I will help you plan. I will definitely find a chance for you to meet old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madam said with satisfaction. As long as my mother gets better, Yuru is willing to do anything. Qin Yuru turned to look at Madame D with tears on her face. Nanny Zhou, who stood by the bed, leaned more and more to the corner of the bed, with a little fear in her eyes. In this room, only she knew clearly what happened that day, but she didn't dare to say anything. For the first time, she felt that First Miss was too terrible. It was obviously the First Miss who wanted to kill Madame that day. No one had expected this. Today, it was also the First Miss who showed filial piety to Madame in front of old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion. When did the First Miss become so terrible? Since the matter was settled, people of Duke Yong's mansion also left. Before leaving, Nanny Huang came over in a hurry. Old Madame took her to a room on the side, talked for a while, and then left with people. First Miss, I am going to pack things for you. Madame Dowager wants you to live here and serve Madame D nearby. Even if you can't serve her personally, Madame D will get better when she sees you. Nanny Huang said to Qin Yuru respectfully. Since then, she really considered for Qin Yuru. Nanny Huang, I can only rely on you in the future. Qin Yuru sighed and said. First miss, don't worry. I will definitely help you. Nanny Huang sighed helplessly and said. The conditions of old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion forced her to follow Qin Yuru wholeheartedly. Go and help me pack things. Qin Yuru nodded and waved her hand weakly. Nanny Huang excused herself. The room became quiet, and only Nanny Zhou's body carefully leaned on the bed again. Nanny Zhou. Qin Yuru said softly. Nanny Zhou's voice was gentle in the past, but it made Nanny Zhou tremble in fear when she heard it. She looked up at Qin Yuru with a pair of frightened eyes and said timidly, First miss. Nanny Zhou, are you afraid of me? Qin Yuru stared at Nanny Zhou's slightly pale face and said with a smile. In Nanny Zhou's eyes, Qin Yuru's smile was like a grim smile. Nanny Zhou's lips trembled and then she said, First miss, I dare not. Dare not? Why don't you dare? Qin Yuru said with a smile. She moved her feet and took a step forward, forcing Nanny Zhou to come closer. Nanny Zhou shrank her body again and said, First miss, I dare not. I really didn't see anything and I don't know anything. You didn't see anything and you don't know? Qin Yuru stopped and repeated the words thoughtfully. Her cold eyes fell on Nanny Zhou's face, which made Nanny Zhou tremble with fear. First miss, you can rest assured that I really don't know anything. Absolutely. I won't talk nonsense. Nanny Zhou heard her teeth chattering and did not dare to raise her head to look at Qin Yuru. That's the best. Qin Yuru smiled in a low voice. Her voice was gentle and clear, with the unique reservation of a miss from an aristocratic family. Nanny Zhou has served my mother with all your heart. I hope you can serve me with all your heart in the future. Yes, first miss, rest assured. I know. Nanny Zhou said repeatedly. Ask someone to arrange a place for me to live. I will live in the second room on the right. It doesn't need to be close to my mother's room. Qin Yuru ordered. Yes, this old servant will go prepare now. Nanny Zhou almost ran away. When she got outside, she felt that her back was hot. In such a cold day, she was so scared that she broke into a cold sweat. She stood at the door and wanted to look back, but she did not dare. She gritted her teeth and waved to the two little maids in the corridor, motioning them to come over. Then she took them to clean up Qin Yuru's room. As for Madame D, she didn't have to worry about first miss in the house. Mother, do you also wish would he trample on Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru? Then don't blame me for being ruthless. In fact, I'm not ruthless enough. Otherwise, how could I let you live? Qin Yuru looked at Madame D's pale face and muttered to herself. Madame D was still unconscious in the room. After saying that, he reached out and touched Madame D's hair. His eyes fell on Madame D's neck. There was a thick bandage wrapped around her neck. He didn't know how badly she was hurt. He lowered his hand and wanted to untie the bandage, but he didn't really untie it. The light shone in through the window and fell on Qin Yuru's face. Her smile was as bright as a flower, and it reflected Madame D's pale face. It looked so strange and chilling. Mother, don't worry. You won't die in vain. Madame D's neurotic voice sounded cold and hollow in the room. Chapter 389. When Qin Wanru came over, Qin Yuru's things were being moved here one by one. Yulan Pavilion, which had been deserted for a long time, suddenly became lively. The servant girls and old maids who had been sent to other places also came back. The courtyard, which had been overgrown with weeds, was cleaned up again. Qing Shui and Heng Ye led a group of servant girls and old maids to clean the courtyard inside and outside. Madame D originally had two personal servant girls, Maya and Maybao, but they were also sent away later. This time they came back again, which could be regarded as the previous principal servant girl. Qing Shui originally came here with the title of principal servant girl. Since Hongye entered the mansion, she was also regarded as a principal servant girl. Now there were 4 more principal servant girls around Madame D, together with Nanny Zhou, several little servant girls, and rough old maids. The whole courtyard immediately became a lot more lively. Following Qin Yuru were her 2 personal principal servant girls, Mei Shui and Mei Yan. She actually had 2 personal principal servant girls, but she was used to using Mei Shui and Mei Yan, so they stayed in her Yalan pavilion. Nanny Huang also came over. Although she did not bring many people, they occupied several main rooms. Second sister, I'm not feeling well. I have to trouble you to take care of mother. Qin Yuru looked at Qin Wanru with a pale face. She looked listless and was supported by 2 principal servant girls. There were tears between her eyes. Her eyes were red and swollen. It could be seen that she had just cried hard. Big sister, rest assured. But I'm afraid I have to trouble you at night. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Qin Yuru pretended to be so weak, which was very different from yesterday. It seemed that she was struggling to get up. Then I and second sister will take turns to rest. Second sister will come during the day, and I will guard at night. We have to let mother wake up. Qin Yuru said with a sad face, as if it was true. Big sister, go to rest. Qin Wanru said calmly. After talking with Qin Wanru, Qin Yuru held the hands of 2 servant girls and went to her temporary room. She really left this matter to Qin Wanru. First Miss is Madame D's biological daughter. How can she be so at ease? Yujia looked at Qin Yuru's back angrily and said. She will come out. Qin Wanru said calmly and turned to walk to the main room. She walked into the main room and turned into the inner room. Madame D was lying straight on the bed without any sound. Yesterday, there was a great disturbance, so Qin Wanru did not look at Madame D. Qin Wanru did not look at all. Wanru found that Madame D was completely different from the madam in her memory. In his previous life, before he died, he had seen Madame D once from a distance. At that time, she was a noble madam who entered the palace. She was gorgeously dressed and looked young and energetic. At first glance, she was a beauty in her 30s. When she looked up and saw him, she curled up her lips coldly and sarcastically. Then, she turned around and left with her maid. Wanwas and Qin Hud Wanru long ago she had not even looked at had Bai Wanru had Qin. Now, Madame D looked like she was in her 50s or 60s. She had white hair on her head, and her face was thin and ugly. There was also a scar on her face, which should have been left by the powder she spilled on her face the last time she wanted to disfigure herself. That medicine contained powder that would not allow scars to form. Even though it had formed a scar, it still left such a large bump that was different from the skin color. There was a white bandage tied around her neck. She lay there lifelessly, as if she was not breathing. Only the slight rise and fall of the quilt on her chest showed that she was alive. Seeing Qin Wanru coming in, Nanny Zhou was stunned for a moment and suddenly stepped forward to salute. Qin Wanru sat on the chair in front of the bed and glanced at Nanny Zhou with a gentle smile. Nanny Zhou, what did the doctor say? I don't know. Nanny Zhou lowered her head and said. Nanny Zhou, you have been serving Madame D for a long time. Father didn't punish you after such a thing happened. He still keeps you by Madame D's side because of your loyalty to Madame D. However, this kind of thing can only happen once. If something happens to Madame D again, I'm afraid that Nanny Zhou will have to sacrifice herself for her. You have been serving in the mansion for a long time. You should know father's means. Qin Wanru's eyes flickered slightly. Although her tone was gentle, the meaning in her words was absolutely not gentle. Nanny Zhou hurriedly said, Second Miss, don't worry. I will protect Madam even if I die. I will not let Madam be hurt again. Hurt? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said meaningfully. No, not hurt. I made a slip of the tongue. I said I will not let Madam hurt herself again. Nanny Zhou shook her head repeatedly and explained hurriedly for fear that Qin Wanru would misunderstand. That couldn't be better. Father has always been strict with his ideas. Such a thing almost made Duke Yang's mansion and our Qin's mansion go against each other. Father has always cared about this kind of thing. Qin Wanru said leisurely. Her words sounded like a warning and a sigh. When Nanny Zhou heard it, she was so scared that she was flustered. Second miss, I know. Nothing will happen again. Did the doctor come today? What doctor? Qin Wanru asked, narrowing her eyes and paying attention to Madame D's injury. Just now old Madame of Duke Yang's mansion asked the imperial physician from the palace to come over, but he hasn't come yet. Previously, the general also intended to ask the imperial physician. Madame's injury is too serious. She can't speak until now. She is very dizzy. Even if she wakes up, she will fall asleep soon. Nanny Zhou said worriedly. Did he say that he will come soon? Qin Wanru smiled and asked lightly. He said that he will come soon. It should be soon. Nanny Zhou said hurriedly. Chu Lu, accompany Nanny Zhou to Chuehua Gate to wait. If the imperial physician comes, bring him here immediately. Qin Wanru ordered Chu Lu. When she came here this time, she brought 2 servant girls, one was Chu Lu and the other was Yujie. Chu Lu answered and came over. She smiled at Nanny Zhou and said, Nanny Zhou, let's go. We will wait for the imperial physician to come and bring him here directly. It will be faster. Nanny Zhou's pupils contracted. She looked at Qin Wanru and Yujie behind Qin Wanru in astonishment. She opened her mouth and was very flustered. If she also left, there would only be second miss and her personal servant girl left in this room. What if something happened? What? You don't want the imperial physician to come quickly? Qin Wanru's face slightly darkened. Yujie snorted coldly. Nanny Zhou, if you don't bring the imperial physician here quickly, can you bear the responsibility if something happens later? Yes, 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 I will wait for him right now. Nanny Zhou said hurriedly. She did not dare to hesitate anymore and turned to leave with Chu Lu. She thought that second miss would not do anything to Madame at this time. If something really happened to Madame after she left, everyone would think that it was second miss who did it. After Nanny Zhou and Chu Lu left, Qin Wanru and her servant girl were left in the room. Use the medicine. Qin Wanru ordered. Yujie nodded and came out from behind Qin Wanru. She took out a small medicine bag from her arms, walked to the bed, squatted down, and smeared some powder near Madame D's nose. Immediately, a pungent smell rushed into Madame D's nose, which made her wake up involuntarily. She pressed her throat and coughed while looking at a figure in front of her in a daze. She reached out and seemed to want to catch the figure in front of her. But when she saw clearly that it was Yujie in front of her, she was stunned for a moment and couldn't remember who the servant girl in front of her was. Madame D, our second miss is here to take care of you. From now on, our second miss will serve you until your injury is healed. Yujie said with a smile. She reached out to wrap the powder in her hand and stuffed it into her sleeve. Seeing the bag of powder in Yujie's hand, Madame D suddenly woke up from her drowsiness. She immediately pushed Yujie away and made a ha-ha sound in a panic, but she couldn't say a complete sentence. Madame D, I heard that you have hidden a lot of good things here. It happens that I am here to serve you. There are no outsiders, so I want to see what good things you have here. Qin Wanru walked over with a smile and her eyes fell on Madame D's face. Her delicate little face was as white as jade, which made her more and more beautiful. Madame D waved her sleeves hard, as if she wanted to drive Qin Wanru away. But at this time, she just shook her sleeves and couldn't make any big movements at all. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and returned to the previous chair and sat down indifferently. Her eyes fell on Madame D's flustered face. Seeing that Madame D turned her neck to look for something with difficulty, Qin Wanru smiled sweetly and said, "Madame D, are you looking for Big Sister?" "Actually, Big Sister is also here to serve you, but she suddenly fell ill this morning. Although she is here now, she is resting in the side room." As soon as Qin Wanru said this, a trace of sadness flashed in Madame D's eyes, and she immediately stopped moving. Did Madame D remember what happened yesterday? Big Sister is really Madame D's good daughter. She knew Madame D's mind and specially helped Madame D. She wanted to send Madame D to death. Then she framed me and my mother with Madame D's death. Seeing Madame D's action, Qin Wanru smiled. Her smile was as gentle as water, but it made Madame D's face turn pale. Her fingers trembled and pressed on the bedside, and she gasped heavily. Maybe Big Sister is also afraid to see you now, so she deliberately didn't come over. When the imperial physician comes later, let him see whether you can be saved. I am afraid that this is not good. You can't just hang yourself. Qin Wanru looked Madame D up and down. She found that Madame D was flexible on one side, but it was difficult for her to move the other side. In addition, Madame D had been unconscious before, so her situation was very bad. Madame D, I am afraid that because of my good Big Sister's desperate pull, although you are still alive, you have a stroke. Chapter 390. The sound of footsteps came from outside. Qin Wanru signaled to Yujie, and Yujie stepped aside. "Second Miss, Imperial Physician Li is here." Chu Li's voice came from outside. Qin Wanru stood up and hid behind the gauze curtain. Yujie walked to the door and lifted the curtain. A middle-aged Imperial physician walked in, followed by a servant carrying a medicine box. Nanny Zhou followed behind. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Madame D lying on the bed with her eyes open and motionless. She was so scared that she rushed to her and asked, Madam, what's wrong with you?" Madame D just woke up. She seemed to feel something wrong and was scared. Yujie came over and bowed to the imperial physician respectfully. Madam, where do you feel uncomfortable? Please tell me." Nanny Zhou was so anxious that she was about to cry. Being called by her, Madame D seemed to come back to life. She turned her head with difficulty and looked at the imperial physician who just came to the capital city. Her eyes lit up and she wanted to move over, but it was not convenient for her to move. Nanny Zhou, help Madame D to tidy up and let the imperial physician feel her pulse first. Yujie came forward and said softly. She and Nanny Zhou helped Madame D to lean against the bed, and then picked up a handkerchief and put it on Madame D's hand. Chu Lu moved a stool to the bed and asked the imperial physician to sit down. Imperial physician Li sat on the stool, reached out to feel Madame D's pulse, and carefully felt it. It was very quiet in the room, and only the sound of everyone's breathing became clear. He felt the pulse with one hand. Then, he switched to the other hand. Suddenly the curtain was lifted, and Qin Yuru rushed in with Mei Shui. Mother, everyone was shocked by her, and even Imperial Physician Li opened his eyes and looked at her. Nanny Zhou, how is Mother? How is she? Qin Yuru came over and held her, looking anxious. Imperial Physician Li coughed heavily, closed his eyes again, and quietly began to treat Madame D. Big Sister, come in first, don't disturb the Imperial Physician. Qin Wanru slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Qin Yuru was afraid that people would know that she, as a daughter, did not appear by Madame D's side, so she came to show her face. Qin Yuru also came in, sat on a chair on the side, and asked eagerly, Second Sister, how is Mother? Big Sister, don't talk. Let the Imperial Physician feel the pulse. Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Yuru's face was a little pale, but she knew that she could not speak at this time. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand and looked out of the tent angrily. She had long forgotten that the Imperial Physician was coming, otherwise, she would not have gone to rest just now. The imperial physicians in the palace represented more than just excellent medical skills. Moreover, she had the opportunity to see the nobles in the palace. If people knew that she did not stay by her mother's side, it would not be good to hear. It might even affect her future plans. She could not let people think that she was unfilial. Second younger sister, why didn't you tell me that the imperial physician was here? After thinking about it, she felt unwilling and lowered her voice. Qin Wanru glanced at her and sneered in her heart. Knowing that she was worried about her reputation, she no longer pretended to be sick and came over in a hurry. Just now, 2 servant girls couldn't even help her up. At this time, when she entered the door, she rushed over alone. She really recovered fast. Big sister is not feeling well and needs to rest. I dare not to disturb you, Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Yuru's face became more and more ugly, and the handkerchief in her hand was almost crushed. I'm really not feeling well, she argued. Big sister, I know that you are not feeling well. After the imperial physician finishes treating Madame D, I will ask him to treat you, Qin Wanru said calmly. Pretending to be sick in front of the imperial physician. Qin Yuru immediately denied this idea and hurriedly shook her head. It's not necessary. How can we ask the imperial physician in the palace? Since he is going to feel Madame D's pulse, he can take a look at Big Sister's body. It's not a big deal. At that time, I will ask my father to send a generous gift to the imperial physician. Qin Wanru slightly raised her watery eyes and said softly. It's not good, forget it. Let's hear about mother's condition first. Qin Yuru laughed dryly. The so-called trick of pretending to be sick was very easy to be exposed. Moreover, it was the imperial physician from the palace who came. His medical skills could not be doubted. If he said he was pretending, then he was pretending. Qin Wanru stopped talking and sneered coldly. Qin Yuru did not know, but she knew there was a kind of medicine that could mess up a person's pulse. When the doctor felt the pulse, he would think that the person was really sick. Do you have a person in charge at this time? Outside the tent, Imperial Physician Li had finished feeling the pulse and checked Madame D's complexion and tongue coating. He also asked Nanny Zhou to untie the scarf around her neck. After checking, he raised his voice. When he came, there should be a miss in the tent. Later, another miss came, but he did not know which one was in charge. Imperial Physician, how is my mother? Qin Yuru stood up and went out, looking anxious. Imperial Physician Li looked her up and down and recognized that she was the one who rushed in just now. He frowned slightly and then looked at Qin Wanru, who came out with Qin Yuru. It could be seen that Qin Wanru was younger than Qin Yuru, and she did not seem to have grown up. It turned out that the one who was guarding in the room was the younger one, and the older one came when she saw him. Although Imperial Physician Li treated the nobles in the palace, sometimes he was invited by aristocratic families to treat patients, so he knew a little about some things in the inner courtyard of aristocratic families. It seemed that the miss behind him was the biological daughter of this madam, and the older one who came later must not be the biological daughter. Otherwise, she would not be so careless. Is this second miss? After Imperial Physician Li judged who was the new one, he naturally spoke to his biological daughter. I am. Qin Wanru answered with a smile and stepped forward. Your mother's health is not very good. Second miss, you'd better talk with me in the outer room. Imperial Physician Li looked at Madame D, who was nervous on the bed, and said. Imperial Physician, this is my mother. How is my mother's health? Imperial Physician, please tell me. Hearing this, Qin Yuru knew that Imperial Physician Li had misunderstood, and this misunderstanding made her feel ashamed and annoyed. She suppressed the annoyance in her heart and said to the Imperial Physician respectfully. This is First Mrs. Biological Mother. Imperial Physician Li looked at Qin Yuru and then looked at Madame D, who was lying on the bed. This is my mother, not second sisters. Imperial Physician, please tell me. Qin Yuru said bluntly and bowed sideways. With her eyes slightly red, she asked again, "Imperial physician, what's wrong with my mother? Is there anything wrong?" Knowing that he had made a mistake, Imperial physician Li glanced at Qin Yuru and then Qin Wanru, who was standing on the side. He knew that he had misunderstood before. After being interrupted by Qin Yuru, he forgot to say what he wanted to say outside. He coughed in a low voice and said, "Your mother's vocal cords are injured and her voice is bad. She needs to recover slowly, but this is not the most serious." "What else?" "Imperial physician, please tell me," Qin Yuru implored anxiously. Seeing Madame D lying on the bed, Qin Wanru also became alert and looked at Imperial physician Li nervously. "Your mother had a stroke. Although it is not very serious, I'm afraid she needs to take good care of herself. She can't be too tired, and she needs to be careful of many big mood swings. She needs to meditate and recuperate normally," Imperial physician Li said. "Then, can she recover completely by meditating and recuperating?" Qin Yuru asked anxiously. "Well, I'm afraid she will be the same as before. It's unlikely, but it's always good to take good care of her. Half of her body has a stroke, and it's not too serious. But it will be inconvenient for her to move her limbs in the future," Imperial physician Li said implicitly. "If she can recuperate properly, she will be fine. She had a stroke, so she could only be in this half-dead state. It would be difficult for her to even get up." Madame D's head was buzzing, and there were only these few words in her ears. She rolled her eyes on the bed and fainted directly. How could her glory, splendor, wealth, and her road to a high position be gone? Qin Yuru was also stunned. Madame D actually had a stroke, and she seemed to be in a bad state. Did this mean that she had to stay by the bed all the time? What should she do? "Imperial physician, Madame D has fainted, please help to take a look," only Qin Wanru said to Imperial physician Li calmly. Imperial physician Li took Madame D's pulse again, and then turned to Qin Yuru and said, "First miss, your mother has suffered a great blow, and I hope you can help her understand. If she can't get over it, her health will get worse and worse. Now that she is in this state, you just need to take good care of her. Don't worry too much, just follow your heart and be indifferent to everything." Qin Yuru stared blankly at Madame D, who was lying on the bed, and didn't hear what Imperial physician Li said at all. There was only one sentence in her ears now, which was that her mother would be in this half-dead state forever. As her daughter, she could only serve her mother by the bed from then on. She could only spend her time here, and it was inconvenient for her to attend some banquets between misses. She had just arrived in the capital city, and her favorite thing was to attend various banquets between misses from aristocratic families. In the future, she would not have the chance to wear beautiful clothes to attend banquets. Imperial physician Li, please tell Nanny Zhou what we should pay attention to in this aspect. Qin Wanru reminded Imperial physician Li softly. Yes, just tell me." At this time, Nanny Zhou also woke up from the shock, and said while wiping away her tears. Imperial physician Li looked at Qin Yuru, who was shocked but not sad, and then looked at Qin Wanru, who was handling affairs calmly. His eyes became a little darker. It seemed that this biological daughter did not care so much about her mother. At this time, she was shocked because she cared about other things. Thinking of the fact that when he first came here, it was not his biological daughter who stayed by the bed. It seemed that this first miss had no feelings for her mother, and even was not as good as this second Mississippi. Although she was not her biological daughter, at least she could handle affairs calmly. He shook his head secretly. Not only was she not filial to her mother, but she was also not a person who could handle affairs. If she did not pull him to talk just now, he would not talk about her condition in front of the patient, and she would be so scared that she fainted. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.